Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host, Ben Hansen, joined by Joe Stary Juba.
That's me.
Old Scary Stary. And then we got Kim Wallace.
Hello.
Welcome, Kim.
It's been a while.
It has. I was going to do the tally, but I think it's been like months since you've been on the show.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So-
What the heck, man?
What the heck, man? Play some
the
better
heck?
games. We'll get you on the show. What was the last game you reviewed?
Oh, it has been a while.
What do you do all day?
Yeah.
Edit people.
Oh, I see.
Which is more time consuming than you actually think.
There we go. You're just reviewing people's writings. So what this is not a regular show. This is a special edition about Final Fantasy and Final Fantasy 15 specifically. So it is going to be replacing the normal show for this week.
Nice.
But I hope everybody can get something from it. But if you remember a couple weeks ago, Joe Juba and I talked a little bit about our trip to Square Enix in Tokyo to see Final Fantasy 15.
Mm-hmm.
We've posted a ton of promptos for people to like
Hey.
throw questions our way about the series and our visit and what we learned, and a lot of just little nitty-gritty stuff. And basically this is at the tail end of our month of coverage for Final Fantasy 15, and we're looking to fill in all the holes.
Yeah. Well, because like I feel like obviously we hit all of the major beats in the cover story and the sort of stories we put up in the last few weeks, but like turns out we were at that studio for like a week. We saw a
was
lot
a
of stuff,
long
talked
week.
to a lot of people, so it's like
Grew to hate each
like,
other.
I'm just saying that there are probably lots of tidbits out there that we just like couldn't find a way to squeeze in. So like
Yeah.
I like looking at the questions people were asking, because in a lot of cases it's like, oh good, I didn't really have a good opportunity to talk
Okay.
about that, but this is a good chance.
Yes.
You two saw the questions. I have not seen any of the questions.
You started to read them and we
so-
snatched them out of your hands.
Yes, so I am completely in the dark here.
If only
this
there
is
were a
scary.
story on our webpage that you could have clicked on and scrolled through the questions.
She's a busy person.
Yeah.
So I will give you a heads up. There were like 5 or so themes that so many people wrote in about.
Okay.
An amazing amount of people wrote in and asked about the characters' ages.
The specific age.
The specific ages. I don't know if this is something that Square has never released, but I had no idea that people cared. And one person sent in very specifically saying, I just need to know the character ages and their exact height.
Whoa, like the whole vital specs sort of thing.
I get their blood type. I don't know. Like, I'm a Final Fantasy fan. I don't know if I care too much. Just give me a broad.
I would put them at a young adult age.
Right,
Probably like, that late high school, early college maybe age, right?
Do you know
Like,
the
that
exact
seems like-
ages, Joe?
They
No.
didn't, no, they never
Okay.
gave like exact, and I think like they avoid doing that because if they do change from one version to the other for
knows?
cultural reasons, of course,
Yeah.
like for context, like that's hard to do. But I just looked at this as kind of like more like not completely coming of age, but growing up. Like you're in that period of your life where like Noctis has all these responsibilities and he's finally coming into, I am going to inherit this kingdom one day. I have to do stuff because of the fact I am the future king. And this means going to marry Luna to help, keep the peace between the kingdoms.
He is Simba at the end of the Hakuna Matata musical montage. I think it's
Well, that wasn't exactly what I was thinking, but yeah.
That's all I think
Yeah,
about.
I mean, and I don't even know necessarily that they're all the same age.
Yeah,
either,
no,
it's not like
yeah.
they're all like like
Gladio seems older.
Gladio and Ignis read a little older. Prompto reads a little younger. So
Totally.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Probably like that 18, 19 is the low end, and then I see like early 20s, mid 20s definitely would fit any of these
Yeah.
characters.
Which
Can we
is-
have
which
10
I'm
more
sure-
minutes of a discussion about these things?
Hey, this people want to know. You got a lot
Well,
of
I was just going to run
questions.
down the most popular things. I didn't expect us to actually dive in this deep.
Sorry, I want to talk.
Totally. No, that's fine. We'll get to some of these. So people are also wondering about world size. We'll try and frame it in some way. We don't have an exact measurement. A lot of questions about summons, an amazing amount. We'll get to a little bit of that.
Joe's favorite
Also,
topic.
a shocking amount of people asking about the PlayStation Neo rumors. Like, how's this thing going to run on PlayStation 4K? What's it going to add to it? It's like, I don't even know if that PlayStation exists. I have no idea.
That was not even in like the rumor house when we were out there either. So like, there's no way for
Yeah,
us.
we stopped by the rumor house in Tokyo for a while and got some gyoza. Also, a lot of people asking about just combat and character controls and all that stuff. So we're going to go through a lot of this stuff. All right, you guys
All right,
ready?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's
I
dig
am
in.
ready. I
Joseph.
was born for this.
Were you really?
Not me, Joseph. Someone named Joseph is right.
Anybody ever called you Joseph?
Yeah, my parents do.
Oh, that's cute. All right, Joseph writes in and says, The Final Fantasy 15 hype train is exceptional. I would much rather have had this effort go into something with some actual substance. You don't need to hype Final Fantasy. Fans already know what it is. So it's a weird angle that Joseph is taking. Maybe there's too much promotion. I think like that Uncovered event was so gigantic, and now with a month of content on our site, he's a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of hype that's building to 15. Do you think this is an appropriate level of hype?
I think we've been waiting for this game for like, the 10-year mark. I think people wanted to know what happened between those years of the game, how it's shaping up. And I know for us, when we went there, and I'm sure you guys touched on this when you guys did your previous thing, but we had no idea. Like, we thought after we played episode Duske that we had a good idea of what was in store for this game, and then actually saw that was not the case, and there's so much more to this world. And even everything that we've touched on, I feel like there is still so many surprises in store, stuff we don't know.
Well, on that front, I actually asked Tabata. I cut it from the video interviews because it didn't really fit the theme and whatnot, but I asked Tabata at some point, like, you've been releasing news about this game for 10 years. Like, is there anything left for fans? How much excitement is left for fans? And Tabata very specifically is like, I think there's 50% more excitement left to reveal.
So there's your exact answer.
It is a scientific answer from Tabata himself.
50% more on this.
Well,
but
another thing about it though is like when he says fans already know what it is.
Yeah.
It's like, I think part of the hype is to counteract what fans think they know about Final Fantasy at this point, right? I mean, like after the long wait for this game, after the 13 trilogy that was, divisive, I think that part of the reason for, trying to sort of like ramp up in the excitement is just to sort of assert that like this is different. It might not be what you think it is. We're hoping that it's better.
Yeah. We'll get into some of these details to kind of flesh it out in a bit. But Tyler Burgett asked a kind of high-level question. What did you like most about what you saw, and what are you still not sold on? And Kim, I'll give you the floor since you didn't get to address things last time.
Yeah, actually, this is going to surprise people. The expected answer that you guys want me to say is something with the characters. I still have heart for Prompto, mad love. But actually, the world really excited me, and I can't explain. Like, I'm a big fan of open world games. Like, obviously, this is not what we classify as pure open world, but it is definitely a bigger world.
Open world with an asterisk might be the best way to define this.
There's that little caveat. It's not completely open world, but it's definitely the most open we've had for a Final Fantasy game. And as somebody who enjoys just getting really invested in a world and seeing all that it has to offer. I mean, just even the monster designs that they've come up with now, how they're that National Geographic style of just walking around and seeing one of those in the universe.
Yeah, there's a great moment from Joe's playthrough that we captured. I used it in some of the B-roll in the interviews, but you're running back to Hammerhead, the gas station area, and just this giant bird thing that flies overhead, and Joe perfectly looks up with the camera and watches this thing fly by, and it's like, oh, that is the perfect thing for when they're talking about how they want these big surprises in the world for people.
Yeah, it definitely.
And you actually see that bird later on too. The zoo.
Is that the thing that's sleeping later?
Yeah.
Yes, that is the thing.
I think that's also a clip somewhere in the interview footage. Just comb through all those dumb interviews. You'll find it.
Yeah, and so I like too that you go to the hub and you can pick up the quests and kind of do everything throughout that area. Because I'm very that's how I like to play Witcher 3 too. Grab as many quests as possible, go in here.
Sure.
Now, it's not going to have as many quests as Witcher 3, so I don't want to make that comparison. But I'm just saying, to me, that was exciting as being Final Fantasy has been so linear before, and to see it open up like that.
So world.
World. Definitely world.
That's
I
the
thought
highlight.
you wanted me to say the thing that worries
That you're not
me.
sold on.
It depends because I feel like stuff could change, so I don't know how much I can. Exploration, I like walking around in the world. I'm wondering how much I'm going to be in that car. I mean, you can set the car controls just fine. Don't get me wrong. I didn't have any controls. I didn't have any problems with the controls.
You didn't mind the stickiness to the road and the... Okay.
No, I didn't.
All right.
Yeah, well, share your opinions on it.
I talked about it last time. I am not a fan of that.
You're
but
not
go
a fan?
No.
I thought it was fine. Nothing about the actual controls of the car bothered me. I'm just wondering how long I'm going to have to be in it because not much really happens on the road as you're going on. You don't see many other cars as far as I saw. Now that could change.
There are cars there.
There are cars, but...
And you can skip it eventually. But we talked about it a little bit last time. I'm also shocked by the amount of time that you kind of sit in a car and just listen to Final Fantasy techno music going from place to place.
Well, and that's the thing too. The conversation conversations that the characters have, they have to be really interesting throughout for me to sit there to do
Yeah.
that. And I'm not sure I believe that can stay consistent for how long
Right.
some of these trips are that you're going to be in the car. So that was my one kind of area. I was like, kind of don't know if I want to be in this car that much.
Get me out of the car. Yeah, Joe. What about you?
Well, and before we get further, this is not to like make excuses, but just to point out, like we saw this game in like late February, early March, so a full like 7 months from release date. So anything that we say here isn't necessarily to be taken as a guarantee that like this is the way the game is going to be or wrap up. With that being said, I'll actually take the answer that Kim thought people would want from her. Like to me, the thing that I was the most sold on, I think, was just like the character interactions and stuff.
Really?
Well, or actually, I mean, I guess it's weird. It's more of like, because like a lot of that wasn't totally fleshed out at this point, but
Yeah.
like, I guess like I feel like the foundation is there and got me really excited for how that is going forward. Like Henson, I know you really like the idea of like starting with your one person and like slowly accruing a party.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to the idea of like having that core group that you're already sort of familiar with and like that you're not necessarily learning about characters at the same rate that your characters are. You know, it's like Noctis knows these people super well already, so you as a player are the newcomer. You know what
I
mean?
like
I
that
think
they
that's
all
interesting.
have ties to each other in the game, because usually they meet like a stranger on the road, and then that becomes like your party member at some point. I like that there's this friendship that's already established, and you kind of just walk into it, and while you can tell these characters know each other well, part of it is you figuring out how they interact with each other and seeing that. And I agree with Joe. That is really interesting.
So that's that's what I would say I'm like looking forward to the most in the final version. I'd agree with Kim on the thing that was probably my biggest reservation is just like just the general mobility. Like I feel like the way you move in combat and stuff, I actually really liked the like warp strikes and the dodging and stuff like that. But when it comes to like actual world traversal, the way that like having to like stop and catch your breath when you're running felt a little weird to me. And
yeah, I didn't like that either.
Henson and I talked about last time too, like the way like the car controls and the speed at which it goes, which they could, and I feel like they could make that interesting by like having it not, if you're traveling from point A to point B in the car, maybe you're not just sitting there and like looking at the scenery as you're going. Like instead of thinking about that as like, well, this is a transportation sequence, it's really like a cutscene opportunity. What if when you do that, kind of like what are those scenes called in the Tales series?
Oh, right.
Skits.
Yeah. So instead of thinking of it like, well, I have to sit and wait for the car to go, really every time you do that, it could be great if like, oh, this is just an opportunity for like my characters to interact.
Yeah.
And we don't know if that's in there necessarily. The version we played, there's not a lot of that.
It's not constant, but there's some
Yeah.
of it in there. I mean,
Okay.
like, you know, like there was a time when like Prompto sort of gets up and starts like chatting with Gladio and stuff, you know, as it's going along. So
but there wasn't like a text plaplaceholder during that section in the build that we played, at least. So I don't know
No.
for sure if there's going to be
I don't remember.
dialogue there.
But anyway, so all I'm saying is like it's not in the version we played. That was like my biggest reservation.
Yeah.
But I would again say that I don't know for sure that that's just going to be like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
I
For
would
me,
like to. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, we have a ton of questions to get through, and I understand it's a big one out of the gate. But for me, I don't think I talked last time we talked about this, about how much I actually like the setting. Like, I love wacky Final Fantasy nonsense as well, and having, like, animal characters in your party, everything like that. But I do like this strange real-world setting. Seeing cars, seeing cell phones, seeing, like, news coverage on TVs about,
Pinball.
Love the pinball. I think it's a really interesting idea, and I want to see them really capture a unique setting. I think it's set up in a Final Fantasy VIII kind of way for that. Stuff I'm not sold on. Characters, I understand there's qualifiers, but characters I'm not sold on, and the overworld quest design.
Prompto? Come on now.
If you just keep saying the word Prompto, we'll get to that. Oh, we'll get to Sir Prompto. All right, we should probably move on, eh? All right, great. Gabriel says, which previous Final Fantasy game do you guys think the Final Fantasy 15 team has taken the most inspiration from?
I think this is easy to say that, not that 7 has come up a lot when we've talked to them about the game, but actually thinking like inspiration-wise, I don't know.
I think it's for sure 5 and 6.
I think it is
Yeah.
too. Yeah, I remember Tabata. I wrote it down that he said there's a lot of 5 and 6 fans on this team.
Yeah, and now like that doesn't necessarily mean that. There are elements from those games in terms of like I know that there are like visual aspects that are making its way in and some like storytelling inspiration and stuff. Obviously, there are a lot of differences between this game and like the old 16-bit
Well, that's what
RPGs.
I'd say. It's hard to
so it's like
it's hard to compare
don't-
that. Yeah.
you don't expect it to be like those games, but like there were a lot of fans of 5 and 6, and actually surprisingly 8. A lot.
Oh, really? I didn't pick up on the 8
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
What stands out on the 8 front?
Like,
Did people
I-
reference it?
I remember
like-
a lot of 6s.
Like
yeah.
I remember asking the art director Hasegawa-san about like what his favorite like summon was, and like he specifically said like Odin from Final Fantasy VIII.
Huh.
And someone else I was talking to, I
He just
don't
loves mashing those buttons.
I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but a woman that I was talking to at the same time with him said Ifrit from 8, specifically the 8 Ifrit summon also. So
Yeah, something that was really striking about the team is how much everybody in that office, it seems like they love the Super Nintendo Final Fantasies as much as the fans do and the outside world do. Like, we talked to Tokita, who's an artist on the first Final Fantasy. He's been there forever, just a crazy legend within that building. And before the interview, he immediately took out his phone to show us like Final Fantasy Legends on iOS. Like, check this out. Look, the intro kind of looks like Chrono Trigger. Like, you can tell he still loves that. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
the
look,
old-
this is
yeah.
kind of like Super Nintendo. You guys check out this phone.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of sad to me that like those projects within Square Enix are sort of being relegated to the mobile. Like we're going to charge you $25 for an iPad game rather than like
There's always I Am Setsuna, though. I think that's kind of filling that void.
Yep. And I'm eager to see how that pans out. But
Yeah. Shauna Wu, just for a quick detour, writes in and says, when will we get to see more of Final Fantasy VII and the remake, or hear more about it at least? We didn't really cover the 7 interview with Katase that we had last time on the podcast.
I
believe.
suppose not. No, I mean it's up on the site.
Yeah.
You can look it up there. But in terms of like they didn't give any hard dates in terms of like, well, E3 is going to be our next big announcement or TGS or anything like that. But the sense that I got from when we were there is that like Final Fantasy the 7 remake is the next beat for Final Fantasy specifically. So like, if like I wouldn't expect Final Fantasy 16 before that.
Right.
Is sort of the impression I got. But like
Yeah.
in terms of when we hear more about it, I mean, your guess is as good as mine in terms of like all the likely E3, Gamescom, TGS sort of candidates.
They'll probably ramp up after 15.
Yeah.
And that all that is kind of not as chaotic, and then we'll hear about it more throughout that. But
There is it's interesting. It's being developed on the same floor. Like developers of the Final Fantasy 7 remake were right over there. It's kind of like a divider between them. But I was looking, I did not see anything interesting over there.
Are you sure they were on the same floor?
Yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, I know there's a Dragon Quest team around there too. But yeah, I believe that is
I
on the
got
same
banned
floor.
from going over there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you started
I also
snooping.
couldn't find the Secret Kingdom Hearts room. There is no Secret Kingdom Hearts room there in Osaka. But
Deep inside cut, Kim.
Deep cut.
Joe, with Katase in the interview about 7, kind of the big news thing that we got out of that, I guess, is the scale of the episodic structure they're going for with 7's remake.
Yeah,
which we
I-
never really knew ahead of time.
Yeah, well, we kind of did. That's I think what's weird is that Square Enix has known what this is and just hasn't been able to convey it in a way that was super clear to people, I think. Because when you say this is an episodic series, people
Think
in
2
North
to 3
America,
hours.
yeah, I mean, they think like Telltale or Don't Nod or something like that. So they had said like, oh, these are going to be full size games, but then again, you mean like, okay, so what do you mean by full size?
yeah.
So the clarification we got is that like, think of them as each one like an entry in the Final Fantasy 13 saga. Like
I was surprised actually to hear that, because even knowing that, them using the word episodic and knowing that they didn't really mean it the way that we do.
They mean multi-part in the same
Yeah.
way that 13 was a multi-part.
Yeah, and I did that. To me, it was like, oh, so it is that big, because you're just like sitting there, like, oh gosh, I hope they don't split it up with like 10 hours here, 10 hours,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was refreshing to hear that was exactly what they meant.
Yeah.
Though they did not specify the number. Like there were 313 games, but they didn't say, "Oh yeah, there are 3-7 games."
That seems reasonable. I think they could
Yeah.
squeeze it into 3. I would hope.
They didn't confirm it, but I
Yeah.
mean, like if I had to bet, I'd say it's a 3-episode
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Right. They seem very aware of fans being worried about them changing things. Katase was even joking because I thanked him for his work on 7 because I'm such a huge fan. And he's like, "Oh, I hope you aren't one of those fans that's going to be pissed about everything that we change."
Yeah, I remember that.
I believe I told him to go nuts.
Yes, you did. That all his fault. If
Yeah,
you
so
don't
blame
know. Yeah.
blame Hansen if they do
Yeah, I'm
crazy
sure he was
stuff.
really
They go
listening,
nuts,
caring about this idiot's opinion. But I mean, connecting back to 15 a little bit, one of the people that we interviewed, and there's a video interview with him on the site, and he's an art director. One of 3 on 15 is Naora-san. And he goes back to working on 6. He worked on 7, and talking to that guy about his work on 7 was a real highlight of my life because we were playing through 7 with a game club, which is entirely disconnected, by the way. When we started that game club, we didn't know we were going to be going to Square Enix.
Yeah.
But asking so many questions of the game club on this podcast about like, what's the deal with all those giant hands in Midgar? What's going on with it? And then literally sitting next to the person, he's like, "Hello, I designed the background art for Midgar."
Yeah.
Oh my God.
If
What?
you have any questions, I can answer them for you.
It's amazing. And so I asked him about the hands. He's like, "I don't know. We were just having fun." And then I asked him about all the graffiti. I'm like, "What's with that graffiti? What were you guys trying to spell where you wrote like Averil?" And he's like, "Oh, that was the art director at the time. He did all the graffiti work in Midgar. So I don't know anything about that." But it was incredibly satisfying to get like really specific about the background art in Final Fantasy VII. Like there's a moment where I was praising him for when you see the coral reactor for the first time. It's like this beautiful hill. I think we talked about it in the game club.
Yep.
And you go up over the hill, and then like the next screen, the sun has like a slight green haze, and it's like, what's going on here? And then the next screen is just like blast wide shot of the coral reactor. And I was talking about how much I love that reveal, and he was so excited that I noticed that he like shook my hand. He's like,
I
"Oh my
remember
God,
that,
thank you so
yeah.
much for calling that out."
I think they were like, people don't notice this stuff, and I think we do.
It's
you
a
know?
great example just
Yeah.
of there's so many legendary developers over there, and
Yeah.
it's just being able to praise these people in person. I don't think they realize the impact they've had on the world. So trying to shove a little bit of that down their throats was my overall mission.
Well, and then that is something that's super interesting too, just because like I feel like at that studio there is an abnormal number of like old guard who are like still there. I mean, obviously they, like there aren't tons and tons, but like yeah, people like Naora who have been there for so long, Katase who's been there for so long, Tokita who's
Tokita
been
was
there for
awesome.
There
so
are
long.
5
like-
people still working at Square Enix that worked on the first Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
Which is pretty impressive.
Well,
Well, that
yeah.
was such a small team.
Yeah, and so long ago, but like I think it's interesting the way that like there's also a sort of sense of equality, I guess, out of it too, because like I mean like there's definitely respect for the people who've worked on a lot of games like that, but like I remember they were talking about like an art contest they had among the team. To I don't know if you remember that piece of Gamescom key art, right? That was King Regis holding like a young Noctis asleep, standing by the car or whatever. That was the product of like a contest among the whole art department. That was like, okay, everyone, your theme is 15 years ago. Like draw something, and like everyone on the team, from like the art directors to like they all just like worked something up and submitted it, and then the team, and then like everyone sort of like voted on what they liked best, and that one wasn't drawn by like any of the 3 art directors. It was sort of an open system where anyone. And I believe it was the artist who did our cover.
Okay.
Who ended up winning it. So
Interesting.
anyway.
Yeah, talking about like the talent on that team. One of the people that we talked to, and I don't think we've posted much from the interview yet, is Chiba, who's directing Chiba-san, who's directing World of Final Fantasy, that upcoming game. And he worked on stuff in 7. So picking his brain, he's like, "Yeah, let's see. I animated all of Yuffie and Vincent." It's like, what? What a weird specific thing.
Yeah. Well,
But then he also, the big thing is that he was a big designer on the Gold Saucer. So I believe we talked a lot about the Gold Saucer. Are we still planning on posting some of that?
We'll see what we can get up on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would really love to, because it was a fun chat with him about that world. Also,
It might not be part of our official
Yeah,
month
it was-
of coverage,
yeah.
but
Right.
we'll try and get something.
there's some
about
little
that.
nuggets and blowouts that we still have after the month of coverage is over. Also, real quick before we get back to 15, there's an interesting little note from Takeda, who worked on the first Final Fantasy, where he was talking about the origins of the entire series. and he said the way he framed it was really fascinating to me, where he said that, well, there's Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, but that was basically just Japanese Ultima. And all we did for the Final Fantasy formula is take that and then add like a movie culture tone to it. A more Hollywood-focused vibe on top of that Japanese Ultima, which was Dragon Quest, and then that's Final Fantasy. And I never framed it that way before, but it's really interesting to hear this old-timer say that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we have a million more questions. Let's get to them.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
Okay, Nathan writes in and says, here is my main concern. There's been a lot of talk about using cutting-edge graphics and changing the mechanics, but I haven't heard anything about focusing on a decent story. He's just wondering, what is going on with that? Do you think that they aren't putting as much emphasis on the story as the tech?
So part of the problem, I think, about talking about a story at this phase is that, like, with any RPG, part of the, like, one of the main draws is the unfolding story as it goes along, right? So it's sort of like, it's hard. That's a hard concept to sell someone on beforehand because you can't really reveal all of the best parts.
Yeah.
With that being said, I feel like they did spend a lot of time talking about the important sort of like thematic connections that are sort of driving the story forward. The sense of camaraderie among the characters, the connection between like Noctis and his father, and that sort of, like that sort of presence being important.
So on top of that, Shadow Master writes in then and says, challenge, summarize the game story in one sentence. I don't think I can do this.
Okay. Well, there's a joke about this that I've had among some friends for a while, and that was like back when Final Fantasy X came out. The back of the box of Final Fantasy X doesn't have some big like you're Titus in this like strange world. It just says the world lies on the brink of destruction, and only a select few may be able to save it. And that is basically the summary of any Final Fantasy game. Like, if you need any one sentence summary for that, that's always what it is.
Yeah.
So that's going to be your cop out for 15?
Well, I mean, because like that is the broad high level thing. If you don't want any nuance about like what the themes and the characters are, and you want to just boil down like that's what it is.
So he's trying to save the world.
Really?
I mean, I think that there is a threat to the well-being of the world through that empire, through that what is it, the Plague of Stars or something that it's called?
Plague of
dark.
Stars.
Yeah, that like the night is getting longer and longer, and there's a sense that it just will eventually like overtake the day completely.
So it's like a Game of Thrones winter situation.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, and that we know that
No.
we know that somehow, like, Noctis and his quest for and his like sort of getting the assistance of all of the primals or the summons is tied to like not only combating this like evil empire, but also combating like whatever this sort of weird force is that's driving the world and that it like towards catastrophe.
And at some point, you probably realize that Empire's connected to the evil force.
Probably.
It'd be a shock if they stayed disconnected.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think I understand Nathan's point where, especially just transitioning out of Versus 13, I don't really feel like I have that big picture, one sentence storyline. Like, I understand like the beats, I understand the characters, I understand kind of where it starts, but I'm also in the same camp where it's really confusing, and maybe it's just been so long since they have messaged that larger picture stuff that I have felt out of the loop, but I could be insane. So let's see. Furus writes in and says, how frequent are the cutscenes? With the scope of the game, I am kind of worried that it'll treat its story like how the Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain did.
It's hard for us to say exactly how frequent they are. I mean, we only played a small portion of the game, and I thought they came in at the right moments. Not that I felt like, oh God, I'm really waiting for a cutscene, or oh gosh, this is going on for too long. But in a game that big, it's so hard with the little slice for me to be like, they're getting it right with those cutscenes and when they should come,
We did play for like 3 hours, which is enough to get it.
It's still so early.
Yeah, maybe like 2 for chapter 1. I mean, we played for longer doing like combat test stuff.
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Well, at any rate, I feel like what we got was at least a vague. I mean, like, I agree with Kim. It's you can't speak on the larger scale of it, but just like from the slice that we saw, the pacing felt like generally it felt right. Like you play for a little bit. There's a really brief scene that just sort of sets up what's happening next. Another brief scene, and then sort of at the end, there were some more prolonged scenes that focused on the story moments.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I could break this down. It's like there's cutscenes in the beginning, like your car breaking down and whatnot, meeting Cindy and whatnot. Cindy.
It's Cindy. I think it's Cindy in North America and Sydney in Japan.
It should just be Sydney over here. It's confusing. But
that's-
anyways, the female Sid, Cindy, of course. There's a cutscene in the beginning there. And then I think there's like 3 or 4 other cutscenes throughout the course of that first chapter that, vary in length, but somewhere around there. So I don't think you should be worried about a full Phantom Pain situation. Joe, what do you think about that comparison?
I mean, I think that there are different things going on with Phantom Pain that are going on here is really what it boils down to. I mean, like Phantom Pain was focusing a lot more on trying to put the player in the main character's role. So they really put, they put Snake sort of way in the background. Then I think there were also sort of like budget and time constraints on Phantom Pain in a way that like just sort of pushed it out before they were able to complete it in the way that people wanted.
I think there are interesting analogies in terms of just a gigantic historical Japanese development studio really tackling an open world for the first time and kind of having a unique approach to it. But don't worry about it being, hours of, gameplay without cutscenes, I would imagine.
Yeah, that would not be the worry.
Yeah. So let's see. Ordinary Goose says, from what you've seen, does the game have a sense of humor? I think this is a really good question. I like it a lot.
Yeah.
Because it's, even we were talking about it a couple weeks ago on the podcast, Reiner framed it as like, oh, I love the idea of having just this lighthearted journey in a car and going off. But like, we should emphasize that Tabata, he said that he likes serious, dark things. Like he loves good war movies. I mean, you look at Type Zero as a good example, a game he directed. It's a pretty dark game. So don't think of this as the Britney Spears Crossroads film.
He does have more emotional journeys that he likes to put friends.
So
on.
it is darker, but what did you guys see that conveyed a sense of humor? Is there anything that stands out?
It is the stuff between the party members, the interactions between them. I mean, you got someone like Prompto who's always trying to make light of situations and throw in a little joke here and there.
There's a cutscene at the end of chapter 1. You've seen it in our coverage, and they've used it in a lot of trailers where like the big ships are flying overhead and they're all looking at them. They're on their phone.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
It was the funniest thing. Well, they try and slip in a joke there, which really bothered me the more I looked at it, where it's Prompto in the background on the phone. He's like, whoa, whoa, and does like this crazy anime thing where he drops his phone and tries to pick it up. So that's the kind of humor you can expect from Prompto, is dropping his phone in a serious situation. What am I going to do with this invasion?
No.
I mean, I think for me, the sense of humor isn't like, I'd say it's not as goofy as it was in some of the previous games. I think, but I think that there's an opportunity to make it a little more authentic and a little less goofy if you're sort of focusing again, like if it comes across like the jokes that a bunch of friends when they're taking a trip together might it's like a bunch of inside jokes and sort of making fun of each other and whatever. I think I think that's where the humor will come from, much less than like, hey, here's a dumb cat character who always says meow at the end of everything.
Yeah, that's what it's more going to be.
Oh, you mean
like,
comedy?
It's going to be characters giving each other crap because they're friends.
Yeah.
And
But we should know, I mean, this is chapter 1, and the way they very much framed it is that the end of chapter 1 is when things get serious. So I'm curious how much kind of the lighthearted party banter carries forth into the rest of the game and how much is still there.
I think it'll be there, but I think also there's going to be like a lot of infighting in the group, and you can't go on a road trip with your friends and not get mad at them at one point
I would
or
expect
another.
this game to be darker than people think it is right now. I think it's going to be a takeaway.
Tabata, when I interviewed him for a different feature, the new direction of Final Fantasy they did, he said he wants the ending. His goal is to make people cry. So
we're going to get to that.
So you're going to cry.
That's coming up in a
You're
bit.
going to cry.
Yeah, but I mean, like at the same time, I don't know if I'd characterize it as like there have been no statements like this is the darkest Final Fantasy ever or anything like that.
I think it's just trying to read Tabata's sensibilities and what we've seen so far.
Because like I feel like every Final Fantasy gets sort of like dark, like there are elements that get dark and serious, and they still manage to get some of that levity in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All bravest. Let's see. So Sunny M says, so quite a bit has been revealed about the political marriage between Noctis and Luna. But when you played a bit of the game, was it clear how close they were, how often they've spoken to each other after childhood, or even why Luna plays a large role in Noctis's life?
This sounds like such a Kim question. I love it.
No, it's just a question, actually. It's not a Kim question at all. But yeah, what did we learn about Luna from the first chapter?
Not a whole lot. She is not in it much. There's a flashback scene
Right.
where you get a little look at Noctis and Luna as children when like they're sort of passing this book back and forth that has like a pressed flower in it.
And that scene's in Japanese. I
And-
wish I knew what they were saying.
Yeah, I don't know for sure what it is. But and then we also see the two dogs, Umbra and I don't remember the name of the white one.
I can't
But
remember.
anyway, so the two dogs who are sort of like Luna's servants isn't quite the right way
Yeah.
to put it, but I mean like the companions and sort of like anyway.
But that comes at like the first stop once you leave the gas station area.
Yeah.
So when you pull into that next area, that's when you see a dog, and then you flash back to that
Right.
Luna stuff. So,
So-
it's early.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're talking probably the first 90 minutes or so. You get a glimpse, and I'm sure that she has come up in the story prior to that in terms of like
It would have to be in that
in some of the opening
thing.
cutscenes, or I mean, and you also know even if there's no direct flashback, she's mentioned in terms of like when Noctis is like leaving Insomnia to like go off on the journey and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I think it's clear even from that childhood scene that they're just trying to establish there is a strong bond between them. Whether just because this marriage is political doesn't mean like they never, had any connection. So there's a connection there.
But are they in love, Kim?
That was the question that I asked, and
What was the
Multiple
answer?
times until they finally answer.
yeah, I'm the one who got it answered. So
What is the answer?
The answer is that Noctis isn't confident enough to pursue that love, but there's love from Luna. So we'll see. We'll see if Noctis can get there. I think he can.
I doubt it.
I think he can.
A story
Grant,
of failure of love.
here you go, Kim. This is where you can get some Prompto stuff in. Grant Bulimer writes in and says, what was your initial impressions of the characters? Did you care about them after your short time with them? In my favorite entries to the Final Fantasy series, 8 specifically, there is an instant connection to the characters. In other entries, such as 12, Vaughn is a wiener, and that game took me 9 years to finally finish. So what is your sense of the characters in the beginning and your impressions of them?
I mean, I always attach to characters, and
out of town.
even when I play the demo, and everybody. So here's a funny story. Prompto is actually from the demo and the feedback they got the least like character, and he ended up being my favorite. And then when we got there, I started asking a lot of questions kind of about where they were going with it. And then they filled out kind of if people have watched the anime series Brotherhood, now that Prompto has pretty sad childhood.
Did you watch the anime?
A little bit of it. I haven't gotten
Joe, did you watch the anime?
I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Uh-huh.
I said I watched the first episode. Give me a break. Jeez.
I will not.
Got
All right, go
life
on.
here. But anyways, no, I'm gonna go try to watch it. But it made me really curious because there's a reason why he plays everything kind of. He overacts everything, tries to bring that lightheartedness to the group. Always feels like he's got to do something because he's not like the strongest. He reminds me kind of a little bit maybe of myself, where I'm kind of like a klutz and I'll help how I can, which is just like
You
try
drop
to
your phone constantly for comic relief.
yeah.
Okay, so Prompto
I
stands
like
out for
Prompto.
you.
You know what? I just like the interactions between the characters, and I guess kind of just seeing them.
I was really amazed, and again, this ties into me, I guess, being more skeptical about the characters and the writing in that field. But again, there's a lot left to prove. But like, I played Duskai. I've been following this game pretty well. But like, when you guys were there, they kept asking us. When all of us were there, they kept asking us like, "Who's your favorite character? Who stands out?" Like, I would have no way of answering that question. Like, I don't know. There's that tall guy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a defined framework in my mind of these characters outside of like the interviews that we did specifically asking for that framework. And I'm really impressed that you guys have those takeaways, that you could come away so passionate about Prompto. He's like, that blonde guy in the tent in Duskai? I don't know. Joe, do you have a good sense of the characters from what they've shown so far?
I mean, I think part of it, I think the characters as they're presented now sort of conform to some like archetypes.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easy to assume some things about them just by the way they're initially presented. And I think where that's going to get more important in the finished product is how they are able to like
Make it
subvert
different.
the expectations that people have from those different things. Like a good example of this from the series past would be like take Auron from Final Fantasy X, who is just like, oh, he's the strong silent swordsman. I know his deal, And then like as
He's a
that
ghost, right?
well, as that game goes on, you find out that there are not only the ghost thing,
Not
but
only is he a ghost.
but also, but I mean, like you find out a lot more of
Yeah.
like, you know, the tragedy in his story and the sort of thing that isn't just apparent from like, oh, that's the strong swordsman
Yeah.
guy, you know? So I think from what we've experienced, we're just sort of at that entry level where it's like, okay, Gladio is the big, tough, strong guy, and Ignis is the smart guy, and Prompto is the idiot.
Yeah,
And
they
then
just
it's
can't
like-
give it all away.
Yeah, so there's I think the excitement is sort of how those things are going to develop along the way. Because like as it is right now, I don't think they feel super different from very similar characters just
Sure.
in the like, you know, early hours that we've played.
But to Grant's question, do any of them seem like a wiener?
Prompto seems like a
Don't
wiener.
say
I
that.
agree.
No.
Prompto's wiener. All right, here we go.
Ew.
Drake and Kaiser writes in and says, is the whole game a dying boy's final dream, and this trip is just basically walking through the tunnel of light? There are a couple of references about the idea of this all being some surreal coma-like experience from Noctis. I don't know where people are getting
People
that.
are getting that from the platinum demo thing, and
course.
and part of
Okay.
from Brotherhood. Yeah. So the idea being is that like he was knocked out. He suffered some sort of injury as a child, was in a coma, and then like woke up from it. Except maybe he didn't wake up. Maybe he's just been in a coma this whole time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, there is a reference. It's in an English subtitle in the footage we were playing. I was combing back through it. There's a reference. Prompto talks about waking up from this nightmare or this dream repeatedly, and then Noctis says something like, "Oh, I wish I could wake up." And then Prompto says something like, "Oh boy, you're really a deep sleeper. You're like deep under the ground deep sleeper," is the way he phrases it. So they do joke about what a deep sleeper he is, just to add to the, conspiracy theorists.
I think
out
that'll be
there.
really hard to pull off, but
Yeah. I mean, then there's also like there are lots of crackpot Final Fantasy theories out there. There's the one about Cloud or Squall being dead the whole time.
Sure.
Or the second half of 8, and I mean, I'm not saying it's absolutely 100% wrong, but like it might be a little early.
yeah, to have the
It's a little
fan theories
early to
going
start
on.
doing that.
Yeah.
Play the game, and then we'll see
yeah.
how it pans out.
Gildo writes in and references something Kim already referenced. They've said the ending should make us cry. Does just someone who is important to us die, or is it like happiness?
Yeah. Well,
Well, he never clarified whether he said, I want you. Well, here, when I talked to him, he's like, I really like a game when you really get to know your characters and then you almost don't want to say goodbye to them because the game has to end eventually. So he could have meant it in a way of like, but he's like, I really want the ending to make you cry because I want you to feel something at the end. I don't want it to just be like, that's it.
Okay.
So we don't know. That could mean like, that's it, as in like, this is something happy. It could be
no, they confirm Noctis
sad.
dies.
They slowly lower him into a wood chipper
I'm just
as he
saying-
screams, "Save me, Kim."
It could be a bunch of things. I have a feeling, and I'm kind of with Ben on this, I feel a dark vibe for this one. And I definitely feel like, yes, people are going to die along the way. That's my guess.
I think that's accurate. If we had to try and guess, in theory, we don't know this, but Tabata has made reference to like, they're 4 friends. They're not going to get along the whole time. We had to guess one of them's going to turn their back on
Okay,
the group.
come on. I know what you guys are going to be like. Oh, Prompto.
I don't give a crap about Prompto. No. Who do you think could secretly be evil in this group? If there had to be one.
Boy, I don't think
one of them is secretly evil.
I think there is.
I don't think that's the kind of strife that Tabata was talking
No.
about. When,
Talk more about Cloud Strike?
No, I think it's more like the idea that I mean, like that people are just going to sort of grate on each other's nerves, or someone's going to, they are going to be put in tough situations, and maybe what Prompto thinks is the right thing to do in one situation is not what Gladio would do in the same situation or something. And like, I think that's where the friction's coming from. I really don't think we're dealing with a like, mwahaha, I've been with you the whole time.
I agree, Joe. I think
situation.
Ignis is secretly evil. Time will tell. People.
Well, how it's
we'll
going to
see.
get dark is what it comes down to, I think, with politics. And you can already tell, like, all the political stuff that's going on in the beginning.
Will this game make you cry at the end, Kim? Give me the percentage chance that you will cry at the end of this game.
I don't know.
0%. All right.
25%.
25%. Just based on him saying that. That's
Not
high.
based on him saying that. I mean, already how I care about Prompto. If Prompto dies, I'm just going to lose it, man.
Why do you care about this guy? I have no idea what's happening. He's some blonde
Because
idiot.
we're all a little Prompto, okay?
We're all a little something with a face. What does that mean? Anyways, moving on. Travis writes in and says, my question is, from what you've seen from the game so far, how does it compare to a Western RPG? I understand it's technically a JRPG, and I'm not really a fan of JRPGs, but from what I've seen and from the videos you guys have shown, I'm extremely interested in it. So people who are more familiar with Western RPGs, open world RPGs maybe specifically, what do you think is going to be the biggest shock to them if they play 15?
Boy.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
Do you think if it's a 1-to-1, like I like Western open world RPGs, therefore I should try Final Fantasy 15?
I don't think it's a 1-to-1 like that. I definitely think, like I said, the world is exciting from what I saw. So if that's kind of, if you're into just really getting, but I will say it's not like that Skyrim level of, dig out and find every nook and cranny like a Skyrim or Fallout.
Well, maybe this will prompt a better response to that question because it's a little bit broad.
Okay.
Azur writes in almost to contradict Kim entirely and says, is the open world of Final Fantasy 15 really as empty and barren as all the videos and trailers indicate? Honestly, it looks like a wasteland at times. In your recent footage of the first chapter, there was nothing but dry soil and grass patches. It has me pessimistic. I think it's important to note that that first chapter takes place in like a desert-like area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so don't think that the entire game is going to look like
yeah.
that.
It's like the first area is just like the Badlands of South Dakota or something.
Yeah,
And then it's like,
I
then it
mean,
gets
I was
different.
I was walking around and I found like a little cave to go into, or was it like? No, it was a mine.
Yeah, what was going on there?
Well, you go there later in the story, but you can go in there earlier and you can get like extra items and stuff and just look around. So that's what I was doing in battling enemies to level up. But there are little places to find, and even just like little structures around, because there's also like you could see the railroad tracks as I was going. So it's not like completely just empty soil.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and two, like I said, what we saw was kind of just that opening.
And that's the
area.
thing, yeah. So it's tough to gauge how densely populated the open world is going to be later because we didn't really see any of that. There's like
I
a
saw
Dusky
a lot
example.
of wildlife around. Like it wasn't that it was empty and nothing felt like it was living there at all. You know.
I think in this case, pointing to episode Dusky is probably fair in that like that is a place that had a lot more like variation in the terrain. It had a lot more sort of like ambient life and stuff like that. I think that part of the function of that is like we just saw the desert and that's sort of the intro area.
And one of the things I'm super excited about in the way this game is structured that they were saying is that they want to start you off, this is from Tabata, saying they want to start you off in places that look very familiar to everyday life and your everyday world, like a gas station, for example, and a deli and stuff like that. And then as the game expands and you move on, things get more surreal and more maybe classically bizarre Final Fantasy.
Yeah, and we can't give away any like specifics about it, but we did see concept art from like some of the things that happen later, some of the locations and some of the events from later in the game.
If you go look,
and, like,
Square actually released a video called like World of Wonder. That shows some of the environments, and that definitely shows some cool looking areas, like snippets of what we saw as well.
For me, I think I'm most excited just from what we've seen, and we even showed this in our 5 exciting destinations pieces we've done, is just those cities look amazing, and I just can't wait to really get into one of the bigger ones and explore it. And
Great
just see.
point, Kim, because a lot of people wrote in and they say, are the towns and cities fully explorable? What do we know about that?
We only got to see that first town area, so they are. Yeah.
No, I walked around a little bit in some of the cities. It seems like they're explorable.
Yeah.
I mean, like I was walking around in the streets of what is it, Lestalem?
There's
I
kind of
forgot
a
you
Venice looking area,
Yeah,
and then there's like
Venice
a
one.
Cuba looking area, and you got to check out both those, and like there's a lot of terrain to cover. There's a lot of people roaming around. I think it's going to be a tough challenge, I guess, to fill that. Like, how many shops can you put in this giant town? But it seemed pretty explorable.
But I mean, I think if you take a look at something like, you know, the Witcher in the city of Novigrad has a similar sort of thing where it's like a very, I actually, not to make too many Witcher comparisons, because there are ways in which they are very different, but like that's sort of the vibe I got from it, I think, was like a pretty large city that has like different districts and sort of like areas you can like walk around and explore and you know, different kinds of things to check out.
Yeah,
So.
definitely. Olivia writes in and says, will we ever be able to visit the city of Insomnia properly? Insomnia is where you start the game, where you branch off point. That's the home of Noctis' kingdom or whatever.
That's a hard question to answer. I don't know definitively. I would say it would be difficult just because like once, like the big point at the end of chapter 1 is the fact that that Insomnia has been like invaded by the Empire, and you you can't go back there directly. You need to sort of like go and like gather your strength and meet up and sort of like prepare for a
So
way
you
to
think
sort
it's
of
going to be like an end of the game type thing?
Maybe.
I would guess that you're not going back there until the end of the game because like I think that's how Noctis sort of has to like muster allies and sort of like go and free his
Get his galactic
hometown.
readance up to a certain degree, I
exactly,
believe.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, people
Get
have
those
seen
summons.
people have seen so much of Insomnia, like the Platinum demo, where you fight the Iron Giant outside. That's in Insomnia, and going back through a bunch of footage, like went through all the Versus 13 footage they've released and stuff. Like that location where you fight the Iron Giant has been around forever. So
Yeah.
people are used to seeing that one building, which is based on a real building, by the way, in Tokyo. Look it up. I forget the name of it, but look it up. That I think people are naturally curious about. Do I get to see the rest of the city? So we don't know, but maybe.
Yeah.
All right. Dark Vincent writes in and says, are there loading screens in between different areas of the world? Or when you enter a city, does it all transition seamlessly with preloading occurring in the background? Will we be limited to visit only the areas introduced on a given chapter, or can we eventually traverse the whole world, independent of what chapter you're in?
Yeah. I don't know. Like we were in the one area, right? So the chapter 1 area, I do not remember any loading times from one transition to the next.
Totally.
So it's like
Yeah.
you go to the gas station and that's just part of the world, and you're going to the that resort town, Galdine K, and it's like that's also you just like walk right in. There aren't like loading screens there.
Yeah.
My guess would be that it would sort of be like think of maybe like Dragon Age Inquisition or something, where there's like a larger area that you can explore, but then so in this case it would be like the chapter 1 area, and maybe when you move out of that area to the next chapter is when it might load up another map.
I'm really curious how that's going to work. I scrubbed through the footage when I saw this question. I didn't see any loading in there either. It's pretty impressive tech. But I mean, you can take a boat to like another continent and stuff like that. So I'm wondering how exactly that's going to work. If it is divided like that, but we just don't know. But in chapter 1, at least, I believe it was all seamless.
Yeah, and in terms of being restricted to one area, I mean, like we do know from the end of the Final Fantasy Uncovered event, and then that we put up the story too about the flying car. Like,
Right.
I would imagine that you aren't. That would not be a cool feature. That would not be an interesting feature if you couldn't revisit places you'd already
Yeah.
been. you know?
Right. Very much so. Yeah. I've Become Death writes in and says, I really miss the Gold Saucer, Triple Triad, and Blitzball side content, which can feed into leveling or acquiring rare items. Does 15 have anything along those lines that you guys know of?
Pinball.
Yeah, we got Pinball.
We don't even know for sure. Is pinball playable?
Yeah,
in the
we don't
game
know. We talked about it in the
itself?
last podcast. I'm not sure.
But they did mention that there were like chocobo races and stuff like that. I don't know to what degree those play into your like progression or anything. So
what do you think? Do you think you can breed chocobos?
I'm kind of secretly hoping you can. But
I think we all are.
we'll see.
It's sick. But there's like fishing mini games.
Yeah.
Trying to think of other mini games and things that we saw
Yeah.
kind of in that vein.
Prompto's like photography stuff isn't really like a mini game.
does
but it's
that
like
work?
it's another thing you can do.
What does that mean?
Take
You can-
pictures of the journey.
Yeah. You just sort of like
go
it's
back
like
on
a
it.
side activity. It's not like a mini game necessarily.
Wait, can you like roam around as Prompto and take pictures, or what do you?
No, the idea I think is like as you're exploring the world and driving around, there will be times when like a prompt comes up to be like, hey, let's go take a picture, and then you like go to whatever wherever the marker is and you do it.
Okay.
You know.
Albert Mann writes in and says, back at E3 2013, when Square re-revealed Final Fantasy Versus 13 as 15, there's an action sequence that featured Noctis fighting in the city of Accordo with Leviathan against the Niflheim forces. Do you guys know if they're keeping that particular sequence in the finished game? There are a lot of questions about stuff we saw in Versus 13 and what's sticking around. We can really only speak to what we saw. We didn't see that in what we played. It's certainly not in the first chapter.
Yeah.
But I went back and looked at it, and it's a crazy sequence.
Yeah, and that is 15 specifically. I mean, like
That was the trailer where at the end they transitioned.
Yeah,
So in
so
theory,
it's-
that is 15.
it should be there, at least in some form.
But I mean, that is early. So that's E3 2013, and they say the reboot started. I mean, if you want to call it a reboot, like early 2013. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably I would not expect that sequence to be like frame for frame
Yeah.
in there exactly the same. But I think that it's a good representation of like what they want the game to look like, feel like, play like. So I'd be surprised if it's just scrapped entirely. Especially, I mean, like we know Leviathan is like part of the game.
Oh, yeah.
in some ways.
Yeah.
So like,
It's got to be something.
And they
playable
had
in there.
told us if they set like an expectation for something, they tried to deliver on it. So if we saw something, that was them trying to make sure. And like obviously some things they had to change, like Stella being Luna later on, just to make
So many people are upset about that. Can you explain? So they
I don't
revealed that.
understand it either, because like the character wasn't so much established, but they just had decided to go in a different direction.
Okay.
And
something
them.
something crazy going back to that Versus 13 footage that I didn't notice. But in those trailers, okay, let's just jump ahead. In one of the latest 15 trailers, I think it's at the end of like the Niflheim invasion crazy footage where it's kind of stealth and you're fighting the big mech and all that stuff.
Right.
And firing the gun. In that sequence, they show this person that's in like dark armor and kind of has like this weird
Yep.
mask on their face.
Yep.
They showed that back in Versus 13 footage way back in the day as well.
Yeah, we just know the name now. It's like Arania Highwind, I think is.
Do we know anything about that character?
Nope.
It could be because in the Versus 13, it almost looks like they had blonde hair. It's not like secretly Luna is some alter
Oh my
ego or some
gosh.
garbage like that, is it?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Well,
It could
we'll
be.
have to see. Yeah.
All right.
What I'm hoping it's not is like, what one of the things. Quick sidetrack. One of the things that upset me the most about Final Fantasy 13 was all of these like character reveals going on in trailers, and then you get to them, and like the characters were just sort of inconsequential. Like, I feel like so many drop balls in 13 in terms of like the Sid Raines character, Jill. Nabat, some guy, what was his name, Bosch or something, the gray-haired guy. It's like, basically, it's like they decided they wanted a supporting cast early on, but then didn't want to actually write a supporting cast.
They didn't support the supporting cast?
Yeah, exactly. So I am really hoping that like they are being judicious in the characters they introduced and how those arcs sort of tie in.
So like the mysterious hooded figure that everyone keeps asking about that we know nothing about. They're
Yeah.
not just going to pop in for 30 seconds at the end.
Let's
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Corey writes in, did you dive into the menus at all besides the one that we saw in the Platinum demo? I want to know how upgrading your character's skills works and how you develop new combos. Joe, what do you know about the menus?
Oh, that's for me?
I don't know. I assume so.
I'll let
Yeah.
you take that.
Yeah.
We asked a lot of questions about how to, level up your characters.
Yeah. So we didn't I mean, the interface, all of the interface stuff was still work in progress when we were there. So even the menus that you're seeing in our videos are not like final. So we didn't get to actually mess around in those menus ourselves, but we did have some long conversations about them. And it seems like, if I'm remembering this correctly, that there are basically like several different sort of ways that you upgrade. And it's kind of the difference between like focusing on, there are some upgrades that focus on like Noctis and his abilities specifically, but then there are sort of other trees. Trees isn't even the right way to put it. It's like another category that is more about like kind of upgrading like your utility as a group and the kinds of things that you can do. And then there's another layer that is like upgrading weapons specifically to like make this one weapon more powerful, to make this spell more powerful, things like that. So it's sort of a multi-pronged approach to the way that your progression works. But how exactly, how exactly all of those things interact and what the like pacing of that is,
We don't know,
we didn't get a good sense of.
But you're a systems focused guy in RPGs, Joe. Are you feeling
Yeah.
optimistic about progression in this game?
So I guess what I'll say about it is like what we got to play felt like it was sort of like our characters were sort of mid-range in terms of their abilities. And I liked all the options. I liked all the options that were there. And one thing that I really liked about them too is the, and this may turn some people off, I'm aware of, but like, I like the idea of your abilities sort of being on cooldown. They're more or less like renewable resources. So it's not like you're spending MP and then you're out of it for the dungeon or something like that. A lot of your moves, like when you jump and attack, those attacks consume MP. And when you dodge, I think when you dodge, it like consumes MP also. So you're sort of like managing your MP, but then you also have a slowly filling meter that dictates when you can like issue commands to your party members and when you can sort of like initiate those skills. So sort of keeping an eye on all of your options at once and sort of like firing them off strategically, I think is cool.
This might be closely related to that. Justin Mikos, former Game Informer,
Hey,
Oh,
Justin.
hey, Justin.
and the sweetest man on earth, writes in and says, you also said on the podcast you got to try mid-level combat in kind of like a developer-focused room. Can you talk more about any differences between that combat and the stuff you experienced during Chapter 1?
Yeah, I guess that is sort of what I was talking about. The main thing that I think is interesting that we got to check out was like the activation of the what was it called? Armiger. The Armiger power is another thing that I forgot to talk about, which is the like when all of those sort of like phantom swords show up and start spinning around Noctis, and then they like supercharge your attacks. It's kind of like, it reminds me of like the Rage of the Gods mode from God of War or something too. So like
It's not like a limit break or anything though.
I think it's the closest thing to a limit break the game has.
That's the vibe I get.
It's sort of this like slowly building meter. Like the more you fight, the like more it builds, and then when it's up, you can like you manually trigger it, and then it's good for those like.
Does every character have one, or is it only Noctis with the weird sword thing?
It's only Noctis because, as far as I understand it, and I don't think you have this early in the game. I mean, we had access to it, but I don't think you're supposed to because it's like, I think it's somehow tied to the royal ring that he gets later. Because I don't remember where I saw this or if this is totally official, but like I think each one of those weapons that surrounds him is like a weapon of a previous king of Lucis.
What? That's awesome. I had no idea.
So like the idea is sort of when you're wearing the ring or something, you're sort of connected to this like heritage and wisdom of all the kings that came before.
That's the
you.
coolest bit of lore I've ever heard.
Well, we
from Final Fantasy
tried. We
15.
tried really hard to get info on the ring, more of it.
we'll
but
get to that.
There weren't.
We'll get to
the
that.
ring. They were keeping hush on
So-
it.
Yeah, but I think it's important to point out. I forget if we did in the last podcast because Justin's still confused about it, and he's a super fan. Like this, combat focused dev area. It's not like some. It's not the danger room from X-Men. Like if you see the footage in our interviews, we're kind of in a green field and fighting this crazy varieties where we fight like the Medusas and all that nonsense.
The weird like giraffe things are there. and the
Right.
rhino
You see a lot of
things
magic. That's the area where we fought all those guys. That's why we fought such a crazy variety there. So don't think that like you'll encounter that samurai guy in the middle of a green field. That was just a test case.
and- Yeah, yeah.
Let's explain all of our gameplay footage.
Yeah.
Yosuke writes in and says, one of the lead designers of 15 said that instead of multiple difficulty settings, the game would have a, quote, system where you can switch between different battle modes. It would be designed so that players could either fight in a fast technical style or a slower, more relaxed style. Do you know what they were talking about? Did you see anything like that?
We only had access in our playthrough to the more active version of it.
Did they acknowledge the other one?
I mean, they'd acknowledged that before.
Okay.
So I mean, they weren't really like when we were there. That was not a thing that they were forthcoming about in terms of like how exactly that's going.
Yeah, I think we were
that
trying.
other mode is going to function because like I think that there are some people who are under the impression that it's like, oh well, that's like a traditional turn-based system, and I don't
that's
think
not it.
I don't think that's going to be the case either. But
When I brought it up to them, they talked about it like also in terms of like difficulty as well, like different.
it's basically the substitute for an easy mode. Or
Yeah,
hard
that's how
mode
they
is
had
sort
told
of
us
like-
about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Will writes in and says, I see that the weapons and magic are mapped to directional buttons, limiting the combinations of both to only 4 at a time. Do you have to pause the game and remap a spell in order to do a different magic spell? Is there a hot swap option or something so a player doesn't have to pause the game to try different spells? I feel as though the current system would cause too many unwanted breaks during combat. What do you know about that assigning the 4 slots?
I've been talking a lot. You want to?
I mean, I didn't ask the question on that,
you're
so
the
I don't
combat
have
guy.
the answer to that.
No, that's fine. I don't want to monopolize everything here, but yeah. So I think he's right that there were only, or I think it was he or she is right, that there were only four things to swap between, and that covers all of your weapon types and your spells. You do need to pause to switch those out. With that being said, I don't know if they're going to implement different sets. That wasn't there.
Like presets?
Yeah, well, how you could be like, all right, this is my like magic set, and like they suggest, like tap a button and switch to your combat set. I don't know. I don't believe that was there when we were playing,
Yeah.
but like
Nothing like
And we
that.
didn't have that much equipment or magic spells.
Yeah, that was
in
the problem.
areas
They
either.
only
Yeah.
were showing us like I think 2 of the magic spells when we were
yeah,
really
we
there.
had we had fire and blizzard. We
Blizzard.
also know that we know that thunder is part of it also.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, another thing to address with that, I think, is the fact that there may be projecting some past Final Fantasy mechanics onto this, in the sense that, like, I don't know that you're going to have a list of like, okay, fire, Fyra, Fyraga, Blizzard, Blizzaga, what? Toad, slow, stop, like all of these different spells that you're going to want to be like tossing around willy nilly. The impression that I get from it, and because we don't, and we'll talk about the other magic system as much as we can here shortly, but like, it seems that your options are not like, I don't know how the other magic ties into it, but it seems like you really only need 1 or 2 types of magic equipped and 1 or 2 weapons equipped for maybe a particular area or a particular encounter. I don't think within the span of one encounter, you're not going to be like, now I need fire, now I need thunder, now I need the great sword, now I need the daggers. It's like,
Yeah, I didn't get a vibe that you'd be swapping around too much with all of that either.
yeah.
But what about all those people, that like using some time manipulation or having some other modifiers? It seems like a lot of real estate to have one of the 4 occupied for just that. But that probably ties into the next question from C. Gallon. Did they discuss or hint at the second type of magic that you get from a ring? What is going on with this ring magic?
We
Yeah.
tried to get more info on this, and they were not ready to reveal too much.
Yeah, all we could really get out of that is that like there's a clear divide between like elemental magic, which is magic that you like, fire, blizzard, that you sort of like find, you kind of find like kind of FF8 style, you kind of find draw points in the world that you kind of like get it and use it like an item. And then there is the ring magic, which is defined as sort of a more like supernatural thing. The one example that I can think of is the fact like we know from one of those like active time reports they did that like there is a toad spell
Right.
that is at least used against you. So it's like that other sphere of magic, like that other dimension of like more supernatural, less elemental magic does exist in the world. But like how, like maybe that's where you get your, I don't know, your death and your haste and your toad and your like
That's your theory.
buffs and
Yeah.
debuffs. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's how that works.
I
I don't know for sure if those are even tied to those 4 quick slots. Maybe there's a whole different system for applying that, So
All right. Tyler Eller writes in and says, I'm a big Kingdom Hearts fan, more so than a Final Fantasy fan. Oh, somebody mentioned the word Kingdom Hearts. But I'll be the first to admit that outside of an occasional heal, Donald and Goofy are kind of useless. I got a similar feel from the 3 guys in the episode Disguise demo. Do you think we'll have another Donald and Goofy on our hands with the party members?
I actually asked this question because I was like, how have you guys been improving the AI like after like feedback from the demo? And they had said that was one of the things that they had worked on the hardest from the demo, was trying to make sure that AI was better there to suit you and not just die really quickly. And when I played, I found the AI were pretty helpful. I didn't have any problems. I didn't see anything as bad as I saw with episode Duskai. Now,
What kind of stuff did they do?
what do you mean? What did they do? They
party members.
fought in battle.
Okay, were they healing you? Were they casting magic? Were they
Yeah.
doing their
They
own
cast-
thing?
So here's what I liked about it, and I hope that I hope that that my read on this is correct. In that, like, the difference is that like Donald and Goofy just sort of are jumping, like they're just sort of like AI controlled goons that just go in there and do their dumb thing.
Hey, don't call games dumb on this podcast. Trevor.
Okay,
Come on.
so sorry.
All right, go on.
Yeah, don't call Kingdom Hearts dumb either.
Oh,
Yeah, let Donald and Goofy use their swords with grace.
What I'm getting at is that like Donald and Goofy feel very much just like AI companions. One of the things that I like about the latest, and this is not present in episode Dusky, but like, or in the Platinum demo, you don't get a sense for it, is that like, to me, your party members felt a lot more like extensions of you. Like they're more like abilities that you have and activate rather than just, sort of guys that are running around doing their own thing all the time.
How do you do that? A lot of people wrote in wondering if there's going to be some sort of Gambit-like system from 12. How much can you control these people?
Well, they're part of the level up system is you can also make it where you get your party better, like it's not necessarily skills, but they're you improve your party as it goes along. I don't know what the specific word is.
It's like in episode Duscae, Noctis himself had weapon skills, right? It's like if you've got a spear or a greatsword, you press this button and you do some like big spin with your greatsword. Instead of making it all Noctis focused like that, there's still like Gladio basically has that ability. I think it's called Tempest. But like instead of you pressing Tempest and then Noctis doing it, you command Gladio to do Tempest and then he does it. You know, so like
That's where Prompto is the crazy gun move and stuff like that.
Yeah, that might. Yeah, exactly. Okay. And Ignis has one called Mark, which is him going like, basically him like marking different points on an enemy, and then Noctis sort of like doing warp strikes along those points to like, you know, do damage on it. So there's that, but then there's also the sort of like cooperative thing. It's different from Duscae, but like in Duscae where there'd be like a little orange circle drawn near an enemy in the most recent version of it. And then you could sort of like initiate this combo. That system works differently now. And it's just like if you're fighting close to one of your buddies, you like just press a button and activate. So like Ignis, I think it's Ignis and Noctis have X Strike. Like
Gladio?
I think it's Ignis.
Okay.
No, it's Ignis, I think.
That is an old like Chrono Trigger favorite, right? Where it's like you each sort of do like a cross strike on an enemy.
The best.
So there are all these ways that even like you're doing damage to an enemy and you as a player are activating the prompts. So your party members really just sort of feel more like extensions of your options. You're not just you're not doing your thing as Noctis and just hoping that they're off doing something useful.
Sure. Michael says there hasn't been sufficient info regarding any confirmed bosses that hold strong significance to the game's main story. I was wondering if the team mentioned any new information pertaining to boss fights while you guys were there. Chapter 1, no real boss fights.
The only like real thing we have confirmed on the boss fight front is that like you need to fight. There are confrontations with the summons before you're able to like enlist their help. So unlike in the Duscae demo where you just like show up and by some tree in a cave and get Ramuh, like you there will be a fight sequence for that. There'll be a fight sequence for Leviathan, which I think is what we saw in that initial trailer for Titan, you know, like those sorts of things. I don't know if I doubt it's straight up, you know, like your party's over here and Titan is over here and you just sort of run up and start slashing at him. I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Yeah, I don't want to say quick time event, but something a little more elaborate, like in that Leviathan example from the old footage of like running around while the city's crashing down and all that stuff.
What we'd call like set piece boss battles.
There we go.
Probably.
Yes.
Sort of God of War 3 style, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But I mean, there's the Iron Giant in the Platinum demo. He's kind of bossy.
Yep.
Did we talk to the team at all about bosses? I don't remember it ever coming up as just kind of that mid-scale type of enemy.
No.
Yeah.
I guess we didn't bring that up specifically. I mean, partially because in a lot of ways they fall. I mean, what I know about it, I can't say because it's spoilery. But like I know that there are certain enemies that I think
that's what I keep thinking about.
Like we saw a lot of 3D models of enemies in the game, many of which we can't talk about, and some of those are like clearly going to be bosses,
boss-ish,
but like they just the team was not, because it's such a story spoiler to be like, oh yeah, this thing's a boss, you know.
Jeremy Bowl has a similar note. He says, do you think the new combat style... Oh, I'm sorry. Well, somebody wrote in. I can't find it now. But somebody wrote in asking about optional bosses. They're saying like, oh, that's the best part of Final Fantasy is some crazy, super over-the-top boss that's optional. Do you think that kind of fits that mold then of there's going to be some crazy monsters that could just be floating around out there?
Yeah, they wouldn't really clarify. They wouldn't clarify like what kind of, you know, where they were looking for their like post-game content inspiration, other than to say like they were hoping that this was a game that people would be able to like put a lot of time into.
Okay. Mark says, God, a lot of questions about summons, but he's wondering about how the summons actually work. In the Duscae demo, like Ramuh was summoned when you ran out of HP. Is that the case for all of these summons?
No. Unfortunately, I can't. They weren't talking about specific mechanics, like specifically how it happens, but different summons have different requirements in terms of bringing them in. So I don't even know if dropping to 0 hit points is like a requirement for any of them. That might just have been the case
For the demo, yeah.
for the demo. But it also seems like it's not simply a case of like, you just press this button and
There's a
show
little
up.
twist to them in theory.
Yeah, and I wish we could speak to it, but like in the version of the game we were playing, they were basically able to just sort of like automatically trigger the summon. So I wasn't even able to watch and be like, okay, what are the circumstances that's letting Titan?
It was
show
literally
up,
going
you know?
into dev tools and click down
It's
menu,
just like
summon this idiot.
basically just saying, hey, bring on Titan.
The most popular question Jonad gets to here. He says, how many summons are there in the game?
Oh, really? That was a popular one.
It was incredibly popular.
Okay, so the ones we know about are Carbuncle, Remu,
Titan.
and Leviathan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
They're not going to release this game and not have Ifrit and Shiva in it. There's no conceivable world where that happens.
so
Let's just throw them on your hand.
I'm trying
Get
to
that tally
think.
rolling.
Nah, I'm only
This we've
talking about
seen
ones we can
Behemoth,
confirm.
right?
Okay.
The ones we are able to confirm are the ones I said. I guess what I'd say is that, like, again, with the acknowledgement that things can change between when we saw the game and what happens, I can think of at least 3 more that I saw. As
saw?
No, not saw. As like I know that they are. I saw hints pointing to the fact that that there would be at least 3 other ones.
And I think in that Worlds of Wonder Final Fantasy 15 video, there's kind of a volcano looking thing.
I'm not saying anything about any of that.
Uh-huh.
We're only talking about hard confirmed facts.
And I'm only talking about that one video they released that you can look at.
There sure looked like there was a volcano there.
Yeah, for sure. So we don't know the total number or anything like that, but that's all we know about summons. Let's see. Jeremy Bowl says, do you think the new combat style will be the go-to for every major Final Fantasy from here on out, or will they try to make both traditional Final Fantasy feel combat and the new action based on the games being made?
It's hard because not the same person is at the helm of every Final Fantasy game. So this is very much like, Tabata's version of the combat. And I don't know to be honest with you, I really think this is them testing something new and seeing how it works and if people like it.
Do you think there's any world where they'd go back to turn-based? There are a lot of questions about people being pissed that there's not turn-based combat.
I have to take. Yeah, I mean, I have to take issue even with the premise of that question in some way because,
Listen up, Jeremy.
just because, like, is this something new and are they going to go back to traditional? It's like they haven't done traditional Final Fantasy combat since like 2002, since like Final Fantasy or 2001 FF10. Otherwise,
10 was pretty traditional.
no, that's what I mean. That was
Okay,
that was
okay.
the
The
last.
last-
That was the last one that did
Interesting
your
point.
traditional like turn-based stuff. Otherwise, you have, and not counting MMOs because those are weird anyway. But like, yeah, I mean, like 12 had that like gambit system, so you were like, if you tried to do manual control in that game, you were screwed. So like. That's something different. 13 had like their version of the ATB system and like the whole paradigm shifting and stuff that was super different. And then 13, 2, and 3 it, like did different things with that too. So it's
They're
like,
always shaking it up. And they're never going to stick to like, oh, this is the combat from here on out.
It's never going to be that. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing. I think what they want to know is like, it's just going to be action for the rest. I like I said, I don't know what goes in when they make a battle system. I think they're trying something new. I think next game they could try something completely different. We don't know.
I do think that's one of the strengths.
Yeah.
I personally think that's one of the strengths of Final Fantasy is that like even if there's a game where it's like, I don't love this combat system or whatever. Like I like the fact that they experiment with it.
Yeah.
That it's different every
Yeah,
time.
I would
'Cause,
bet
like,
that they'll experiment more. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to I know people really did not like a lot of this game, but like Final Fantasy 13-2 has like one of my favorite battle systems. It gets in the whole like monster collection element of it.
right.
The way that they strip out a lot of the crap that was in 13 in terms of the way like the system worked and like streamlined it to make it a lot more like tactical strategy and stuff. And anyway, so that's all to say. I don't think there is a traditional version to really even go back to anymore. But I also agree with Kim. I don't know necessarily that like what 15 is suddenly going to be what 16, 17,
Yeah.
whatever down the road.
Yeah,
is
Jeremy
follow.
Joe says go F yourself. So moving on. Behind the how many summons are there question, another one that was unbelievably popular that we talked about earlier is the size of the world map. People want that like numerical mile by mile breakdown. I'm wondering
Well,
if you can say anything about
We're
it.
not going to have that, but I will say, and Joe kind of hinted at this earlier, that we did see like a big spread out like thing of the world with like concept art of cities that you will see later in the game.
Yeah.
And I was very impressed, and I'll just leave it at that to say that this is a pretty big world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
we did.
we
And
do-
I
we
think
saw-
I assume what we saw is the entire world then. But it's multiple continents.
I think there's even more than what we saw.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I got the vibe that there is more than that, but they weren't ready to talk about any of that stuff, and we aren't allowed to talk about it. But to leave it to say that, like, I was like, damn, there's still a lot we haven't seen of this game.
Bigger than
and
GTA
don't know
5. Is that
about.
what you're saying, Kim?
No.
Interesting.
Okay, so actually, an interesting point about that though is like I always find it interesting when a new game with like an open world is coming out, where they always try and quantify it with like,
Yeah.
oh, this is 1.5 times
Yeah.
the size of Skyrim or something like that. And like, I mean, I'm sorry, I love Skyrim, but I feel like there's a lot of dead space in that world, or like a lot of space that I'm just not super interested in that world too. So it's like for me, and Final Fantasy 15 may also have that problem. I can't say that it won't, but like for me, it's so much more about like using the space well and the quality of the content in that space, less than like square footage of the world.
So
you
I'd rather
know?
have a smaller world with more variety.
Yeah, exactly.
And for what we've seen,
That's fun to explore.
yeah, there's a lot of crazy variety in the world. All right, so Adrian wants to know, can I change my outfit? Can I change the color of my car? How about haircuts? The world needs to know, he says.
They did tell me that you would be able to change your outfit.
That's right. They pulled you aside and whispered and said, Kim, this is for you.
No, that was what they said to me, but they didn't go into any detail of how that would work or by any means how many options you had to go with that.
Or if it's an early game thing
Yeah,
or a
they,
late game thing.
they wouldn't go into any more detail than that. I've heard nothing on haircuts.
It'd be
I
so
don't
nice
think
to shave
so.
Monto's head.
You do have some options in terms of how your car looks.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
eventually are able to do some customization there, but that was another something that's about as much as they would say about it.
Right. And don't
so-
expect it's not going to be Saints Row or something.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
probably just like a couple different skins you can
Yeah,
throw.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
kind of the vibe I got.
Like
on
yeah,
it.
decal sets or something. like
Right,
that. Yeah.
right. Kender's rule says or wants to know desperately, will there be a little pet doggy? A lot of people like these dogs.
Well, they've showed the dogs quite a bit in like footage, and I think everybody was curious. Even we were curious. I still don't think that we've come away with much of an answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for sure yes or no if like you get a pet dog.
It'd be nice. Carbuncle's enough. It's technically in
I
your
know,
arsenal.
But I mean, yeah,
we'll
but-
see the dogs in the game.
and we do know that those two dogs have some sort of significance in the story. We saw one of them like in the bit that we played in chapter 1. So, if you're a dog person, there are dogs.
Get ready for some dogs. Johan wants to know, can we crash the Regalia?
Yep,
car.
I sure did.
I did too.
There is something that I hadn't realized that they hadn't revealed yet, but people saw in our footage. It's like, oh, there's basically battle damage for the
Yep.
cars.
yeah, yeah.
So you can really beat the crap out of this thing. I don't know if there is like a GTA style like garage you can pull through to get it repaired or how that repair works.
I think that might have been an option at the Hammerhead. I don't remember specifically, but like I'm sure that there are places you can go to like pay a nominal fee or something and like, oh, my car is damaged, please make it look better.
Noctis Lucis Calum wants to know, can you hit enemies with your car?
He should know that.
We talked about it in the
Noctis?
last podcast.
No,
that's
okay.
right. We talked about it in the last podcast. It's still a little bit confusing. We did, but it was pretty janky in the super early build of the game. So
yeah.
certainly no like numbers of damage came up or anything.
yeah, I did it and it didn't do anything.
Yeah, you shouldn't be. Yeah, don't count on like riding your car into battle like a horse and then sort of
Yeah.
like
Yeah, I
pulling
didn't
on
get
the
that vibe.
e-brake and sliding into
Yeah.
into giant turtles or anything.
But a giant turtle might stop you on the road at some point.
That would be. Yeah.
Here we go. Kaylee says, does your party react to the songs playing on the radio in 15? I think they literally want a Saints Row moment where everyone's singing along
I don't-
to
I
a
don't-
classic tune.
There are little moments of discussion in the car. I don't think it's related to what's on the radio, though.
we have no
I didn't
idea.
I
Well,
didn't
no.
notice anything. Like, there could be like, what would be cool is if there's like announcements that come over the radio that they can. But I said, to be fair, like there are interactions when you get in that car, and we just don't know how detailed they are, how much variety there is in them yet. But we did see that aspect of the game.
We saw Prompto turn around in the car.
yeah. They've
That's
also
really all I saw.
they've also said that they don't know for sure exactly how the radio, like what is even going to be on the radio.
Yeah.
Like, is it going to be? Is it like a custom? Can you play your own music?
Yeah.
Is it a wide range of Final Fantasy music you can play? Is
It'd be
it a
so
bunch
cool
of
if they had like throwback stuff. Like,
Yeah, no,
Oh my
it
God.
would. But
Well,
like,
they have.
It's
in
a road trip. I feel like they've got to do something with that radio to make it fun. And I hope there's at least one pull out where they just sing.
I
Okay.
think Florence and the Machine's cover of like, hey, no. But there is like in the version we played, I think there were like 2 tracks, and one was kind of like a techno remix of the Prelude Final Fantasy theme.
Yeah.
So
and yeah, I mean, I would love if that were just like a Final Fantasy music compendium in there.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
Or
cool.
if that was just one channel that played. I mean, yeah, they just don't. They've not finalized exactly how that radio is going to be
Yeah.
used yet.
on the topic of music, a lot of people were calling out like, "Oh, Heart of Gold from Neil Young is going to be in this game." Joe wanted to give you the floor to clarify Neil Young's presence in Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, I mean that is not a. I should have been clearer about this when I wrote it, because like that is not a confirmed like, yep, that's in the game or whatever. It was definitely in the game when we were playing, but that could also have just been to like, set a tone for this sort of like backwoods gas station.
I think it was very much setting a tone. Yeah, the people.
so-
Like, we all talked to different people. You guys were at different stations, but I asked, I forget who it was, what the deal was. It's like, oh, is this Neil Young? What the hell? And he's like, oh, that's his placeholder. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, yeah, I'm sorry if I got. Actually, people would probably be happier to know that there's not some like real world version of
I love Heart of Gold. I would love for that song to be in there.
Okay, but for some people, that would be sort of like immersion breaking if it's like a song from our world that is like.
Oh, like Stand By Me?
Well, the way those theme songs usually work, though, is that like, I mean, they show them in trailers and stuff, but like usually they play like over the credits, or there's some like instrumental version that'll play. It's not like during some big cutscene moment you're going to hear Florence and the Machine in the middle of the game.
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening.
I would love in the car radio for them to have some song with lyrics that they make, some fake rock song. I think like in this example video, and this is also not in the game, they played like a Bob Dylan song as they're driving around in the car. I would love something to like mirror the sound of Neil Young or Bob Dylan, except within this wacky world.
Or the Crazy Chocobo song.
Yeah, just throw it in there. The best of the best. Let's see. What is this person's name? Drakenkaiser? They want to know, can you use your phone in Final Fantasy 15? Oh, I'm sorry. It's Luca X85. Can you use your phone in 15? I think they have the example of like GTA 5 in mind. Was there a way to like call up your phone as like a piece of UI or anything like that?
I don't remember
I
doing
didn't
that.
see anything
Yeah.
like that. I mean, obviously we see them use the phone in the cutscenes.
There's a
but
lot of phone usage.
and fiddling with it. But we didn't see anything that made that like it was a feature.
It doesn't seem like it's a part of the game. It's just a way to communicate and like get quests and finish off quests, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Matt XXUM says, can you swim in the game? In the 2013 trailer, it clearly shows that you can swim. I scrubbed through the footage to see, Joe, at least when you were playing, because this is your capture footage, you did not try jumping in the water out there on that beautiful area. So I don't know. Do you guys know?
That's my fault. I'm sorry, everyone.
He was right next to that water.
I was right next to the
And
water.
you're
and I
normally a
didn't
real
jump
dick
in.
around in a game kind of guy.
I am. I don't know why I didn't do it.
You blew it, man.
Don't know.
Jamie says, did you guys have any experience with cooking in the game? What role does cooking and food play?
The cooking, the interface was different in what we played than it was in episode Duskgate, but I think it's generally still works the same in that like you have different options of what you can eat based on the ingredients in your possession, and then Ignis will like, when you camp, Ignis like basically gives you an options of things you can cook based on what you have, and what you choose determines like the buffs that you get for the next day. So like that,
The what that you get?
The buffs, like
okay. Yeah.
passive buffs. So there are bonuses, like higher attack power, an experience multiplier or things like that. So if you have a bunch of good ingredients, you might want Ignis to make a really nice meal so you can go out there and like really tear it up the next day or
Yeah.
something.
and hit a
And something
boss, yeah.
else that's kind of cool with food is like, because so many of the towns in this game are based on regions, like we talked about the Cuba looking place or the Venice looking place, I guess like the food based in that area is based on that part of the world's cuisine.
Yep.
So they're talking about like, oh, Japanese focused place. There's a lot of debate on the team about what type of ramen and how exactly that should look in the game because
Let me tell you, that team knows their ramen.
I
Apparently
think that
they
they
know their
actually
ramen.
took that out though because they thought there'd be too much fighting over.
Oh,
the
is that what it
ramen.
was?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So just went with the base level. Interesting. It reminds me about the buffs. Something we didn't talk about in the last podcast is about like dialogue options. Do you want to explain a little bit like what that looks like in context?
Yeah, so it's not something like Mass Effect or where you're a big dialogue wheel sort of drives everything you do. But there are we encountered a couple points in conversations where the player is given an option of like some different things to do, whether it's like hey, or what's the one I
There's one at the
In
beginning.
the beginning with the car.
Yeah, so like you can either like ask Cindy for a discount or like you can ask your friends what they think you should do or something. So like that's what I did is I was like, I don't know, let's see what my buddies think. And then Gladio's like, hey, let's do some work. And then Gladio's like, thanks for asking. I really appreciate that you came, that you deferred to us. And then you get some like attack boost or
50%
something like that.
Yeah.
attack boost for the next day is what it is. Yeah, I think another choice was you encounter a guy named David in a shed. There's a quest there. I think there's footage out there, and there's also another dialogue choice there and whatnot.
Yeah. One thing about the buffs too that I think is interesting is that like because of the way the game cycle works is like it's on a day and night cycle. So what's cool is that you don't have to worry about like okay, this is buff lasts for 15 minutes and is on a cooldown, and this buff it's like everything is just for that day. So it's like you eat your meal at night, the next day. That's you have that bonus and it expires at the end of the next day. So it gives you a very sort of like concrete time period to work with on that.
Great.
Also on food.
Oh, yeah?
Before I forget, just because I know people like details, one option, like Kim and I, like early in the chapter, you're given the option of like what to cook and Kim and I chose different things. So like I chose roast beef
Okay, hang on, let me scribble this down.
and Kim chose chocolate cake.
Cake. Yep. Cake.
Great.
Yeah. So those are just some of the things you can cook.
Fantastic. Let's list food. Blaine Sheasley desperately wants to know, did the restrooms at Square Enix headquarters have forced air hand dryers or paper? I know the answer to this question.
There's forced air.
It's forced air.
Yeah.
Because as you can maybe hear in the video interviews, I had a terrible cold the entire time I was over there. So I was constantly running to the bathroom to go in the stall and grab a wad of toilet paper and blow my nose for 45 minutes. So there you go, Blaine. Forced air in Square Enix.
There you have it.
I really want to make a coffee table book comparing all these AAA studios' bathrooms. That's my goal in life.
You should do that.
Okay, I've used a lot of them. Nick Ransbottom, I assume, same Nick Ransbottom from the Replay crew and all that.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick.
I've been a fan of Final Fantasy for well over a decade, but the Platinum demo left a bitter taste in my mouth. A lot of people were surprisingly negative about Platinum
But I think I can understand that to a degree.
because they're expecting another Dusky or...
No, I just think like it's not meant to be a demo as big as that, and it's just meant to give you a little slice. But I think when you think demo, you think there's gonna be more to it than there actually is. And like it's fun to like prance around the world as Noctis and do the transformations where you go into a car and all that.
And turn into an animal.
Yeah. Like that's fun, but it just feels like it's more, like I said, it show off some of the tech than actually, be like more giving you a taste of the game. It gives you, as Joe has pointed out in his cover story, kind of like an idea of the combat, but even as somebody who's played that combat, like that's not a one-on-one comparison to how it, that's very simplified form of it.
Yeah, I mean, after playing through the Platinum demo, like again after it came out, I can see where some of the where some of the reservations are coming from. And I guess the thing that I would stress about that is that let's see what's the right way to say it. There are things about the actual game that you can sort of pull out of the Platinum demo, but you kind of have to dig for them because, like, to me, the only part of that demo that feels like representative, like, oh yeah, that's what the game feels like, that's what it is like just that one fight against the Iron Giant. Everything else, I mean, and the weird thing is they positioned this, maybe they just didn't come out of the gate with this like strong enough in their like branding of it or whatever, but like ever since they were talking about releasing another demo, it's been a tech demo. We're going to release a tech demo. We're going to show you there's going to be a free tech demo. And then when they release it, they don't say, this is the big tech demo we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's the platinum demo. It's a story you can, which is like,
Yeah.
I understand if you want to like sell people on it and get them interested, but I think that may have also set expectations for something that
Yeah.
isn't, because it really is a tech demo and not necessarily like a substantial slice of what the game feels like.
Yeah. So what Nick was getting to, which is actually disconnected from that, so I'm glad we had that conversation, is he wants to know more about the music. From what we heard in the stuff that we played, do you think it has the potential to become a classic Final Fantasy score? I mean,
I haven't heard enough.
I really like Neil Young, so we can move on to the next. No,
He's a classic.
Yeah.
Classic rock.
I mean, a lot of the music in Chapter 1 that we heard, there's definitely exceptions, little new pieces in there, but a lot of it is like the combat theme, from Disgaea and stuff that people have heard before. Not to say that's not going to change. I assume there's going to be a ton of new music in there in the final version, but it's a good opportunity to plug the interview with Shimomura-san, who's the
Yeah,
composer
yeah.
who goes back. She composed Street Fighter 2 and Super Mario RPG.
All right, let's talk about Kingdom Hearts.
And Kingdom Hearts.
Whatever, Kingdom
So,
Hearts. Yeah.
I mean, I would say just based on the talent, I'm going into it optimistic.
Totally.
Yeah, me
There's
too.
some tracks that I already really like. Like the battle theme I think is solid. But there's one track that's kind of like a waltz that I asked her about, and she said that she wasn't sure where it was going to be placed in the game yet, but it's in the TGS 2014 trailer, the back half of that. And I'm absolutely in love with this piece. It's probably going to be at some point in this podcast. So stay tuned for that. But it sounds so cool. I'm so
Stay
excited about
tuned.
it. All right. The future now we're getting to.
Oh,
this
boy.
is past Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, boy.
Understand there's not a whole lot we can say on
No,
this.
this is
is
where
just
things
us.
I mean,
get
not a
too
whole
serious.
lot.
We're just
Yeah,
speculating.
this isn't even
and-
us like, oh, we're under NDA, we can't say it. It's like,
Yeah,
your
this
guess
like,
is as good as ours.
I don't know, but
Okay. With that
But we
being
do know this one. Kai wants to know what's Tabata's next game.
his next game?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they.
I mean, well, let's see how Final Fantasy 15 does, and work from there. I definitely think that Tabata, from all my interactions and everything, is very integral to the future of the series. I don't think that's a person who's just going to go away.
Do you think, I mean, I don't think this, but what if 15 is just a terrible failure? If it's seen as like, I don't know, the Assassin's Creed Unity of the series or something. Do you really think Tabata's going to be around for that much longer then?
I mean,
Do you think he's worked his way in?
I think he's done more than just 15 for them, obviously, and
Yeah.
I think he's done a good job with picking up the pieces of 15, from it being Versus and how this project has, been in development longer than they want. I would bet my guess, and like I said, I don't know anything. I think he's going to be with Square for a while. I would hope, anyways.
Yeah.
But that's it's all speculative right now.
Yeah.
in terms of his next game, I guess I want to point out that like anytime anything like beyond Final Fantasy 15's release date was brought up, it was very much like we are focused on getting this game out that people have
the
been
love of
waiting for,
Christ,
and like
get it
All
out
right,
the door.
but
Yeah.
can I say what I hope his next game is? Maybe
Sure.
I would love for him to do a Final Fantasy VI remake because he
What a weird thing.
he loves 6. Like we've always, whenever we chat with him, we always talk about that game, and he just has such passion for it still. And I
really-
would like to see him get behind
I
that.
don't want
and
that
help.
one remade at all.
I want.
They already made it. It's out on iOS. It's out as a Steam version.
Final Fantasy VI is my favorite of all of those games, and that's why
It's
I
no
can sort of
different
be
than
like,
7 being remade.
It's a little bit different, but I understand where you're both coming from. I want Tabata's next game to be a return to his roots and to work on a new Monster Rancher game because he worked on those old
You
Monster
did ask
Ranchers.
him about that.
I just wanted to kiss his ass a little bit because I love the old Monster Rancher games a lot. But Jordan has a related question. He says, when are they going to make a new Monster Rancher? No, my question is about what will follow up Final Fantasy 15. This question is probably really preemptive, but Square recently said there will not be a Final Fantasy 15-2. Isn't that kind of weird?
no.
That's such good news.
That's a good news. After I've hoped they learned their lesson with 13 on making that into 3 games was not a good idea by any means. And I think I like Square moving on and doing new and different things. And my guess would be that, like as we were talked about, we're probably going to hear more about the 7 remake next because that they've confirmed. And
Sure.
like some of the spin-offs, and I would guess like if they stick to their word, and I hope they stick to their word, they would go, my hope is right after they finish 15, or maybe they've already started this process of going on to 16. So
Yeah,
hope.
and it seemed like a big, I think we talked about this last time, but a big message was like, I think they're well aware about how effed up it is, how long versus 13 and 15 took. And like, they're like, it's embarrassing. Like, we need to get this machine rolling.
Yeah. And I think them coming out of the gate saying there's not going to be a 15-2 isn't weird. I think it's really to just sort of like quell reservations that fans who've been waiting for this game for 10 years might still be harboring about it. That like that their focus somehow isn't on delivering this game and making it good, but that they're still trying to sort of like milk fans for more and more and more.
yeah, and I think it's good to make it, because I don't think fans want to wait as long for 16 either, you know, in that respect. Who's to say what it'll end up being, but I hope that they've kind of started that process.
And that's assuming that it happened. I mean, because they had mentioned when we were out there, like they do sort of see this as a important turning point. That like, I don't know. I hope 15 is successful.
Yeah.
I liked what I played of it, but like if it's not, like I would not expect 16 to come out super quickly, because like if this approach doesn't work, they need to go back to the drawing board in a pretty drastic way
They've
to sort
put
of like
all
figure
their
out what it
chips
is.
on this thing working. And I agree. Like,
It's
it's crazy
scary.
to think that like,
It's
if this doesn't
scary.
work, 16 could be a mobile game. Like, who
Yeah.
knows at this point, just to
Yeah.
keep that brand going.
Yeah.
It's a confusing time.
One thing I did want to bring up though about the sort of continuing on about this is just like the question of DLC
Yeah.
when it comes to 15, because like even though they came out and clarified that there's not going to be full sequels, Tabata had said that he wants this to be a game that people will continue playing for a long time and after its release, and said like he clarified like that doesn't only mean additional content, but might be, you know, quote, like other features. So I don't know exactly what those other things might be, but it sounds like they aren't making any announcements or promises regarding even DLC. Like they don't even want to do
Yeah.
that.
I think
But-
they want to see how it goes, and then
But it seems like they are open to the idea of providing some sort of like DLC or maybe free updates or you know, things of that nature after the game comes out, but definitely not like 15.2.
Gotcha. Corvo wants to know, do you think they have a shot at making such a great game that, as Andy McNamara put it on this podcast and in the latest issue, that they can, quote, take back the RPG crown with Final Fantasy 15? Are they going to take back the RPG crown with Final Fantasy 15?
That's, I mean,
that's
it's hard. It's so hard to say.
it's hard. As a Final Fantasy fan, do I hope that? Absolutely. I want every RPG that I play to be awesome. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like in my mind, I'm like, yes, that would be great. We'll have to see. I mean, we've had a lot of RPGs in recent years just raise the bar in general of what's been doing. I think we, you know, as we've brought up many times during this podcast, you can't get away from like a game like The Witcher that came out. You can't even get away from Dragon Age, like what BioWare's done with the Dragon Age and Mass Effect series and so forth. And
Do you think that what you played at 15 is scratching a JRPG itch, though, that isn't satisfied by those other things?
I think it's scratching a JRPG itch. I think it still has, but it's also turning in a direction where it feels like it's also more on par with other games that are coming out. But I couldn't say based on what I played whether it'll go in that direction or not. Like I like a lot of the changes they're making, a lot of things that we've said as Final Fantasy fans through the years, like, gosh, Square just needs to start like evolving a little bit more. Like they can't, or they need to make better decisions on this. And I see all that in kind of in what I've played of the game. And even me, who was really skeptical, I was not a fan of 13 at all. In fact, I like the battle system, as I said, but I was very disappointed with that cast, and you know how I feel about characters in this
boy,
span at
everybody,
3
she
games.
likes
Here we
characters.
go. But just saying, you know, I'd love to see it come back and be really strong. And
Are
so
you feeling optimistic after what you played?
I feel better than I ever have about the project, if that makes sense, because it's been a
I will come right out. I am optimistic. I mean,
Your impression changed.
Yeah,
after,
we had this conversation on the when we sort of talked about our trip before, but like I at this phase with, you know, still some time left to polish things and stuff. Like, I think that there is a very good chance that this comes out and is what they want it to be. And again, like Kim said, like, you know, as a fan, that's what I want. And I can also say that I just feel like people tend to think of some of the like larger Japanese developers like Square as sort of being this, you know, like very sort of, you know, buttoned up and formal in their approach to this sort of thing. And like I just like just based on the time that we spend in that studio talking to these developers about what they're doing, like this is not a team of like a bunch of people sitting around in suits sort of stiffly typing away at their keyboards. I mean, like this is these are people who they work on the Final Fantasy development teams. Like they love this stuff. And a lot of them have been working on this series for years and years. So like they, just like any fan, like know some of the lore inside and out. They know the characters. They know
what people are disappointed in. They know the story.
I mean, and like even though some people aren't going on the record and saying like, boy, Final Fantasy 13 was sure a problem. Like there's an acknowledgement of like where the series has gone wrong, where it's gone right, and as individuals, everyone there just seems so passionate about what they're doing that it seems like all of the ingredients are there, and now we just have to see if everything comes out correctly.
If I may play devil's advocate,
okay.
I remember Tim Turry, a former co-host of this very podcast.
Yeah.
When he came back years and years ago, I think it was before your time, Kim, on his preview trip of Final Fantasy 13-2, he had the same takeaway. And I'm not saying they're going to be the same game when they're released, but Tim's takeaway is very much, holy crap, are they listening to feedback? That team is exactly on point. They know exactly what people were disappointed with Final Fantasy 13. And then 13-2 came out, which has its pros and cons. Yeah. And so for me, it comes down to looking at, is the proof in the pudding, what is actually being presented on the game? And I'm still a little bit worried or skeptical about some of the storytelling in 15.
I'm kind of with you. I'm like the most optimistic I've ever been, but I am so like in this place where I'm like, I don't want to get my hopes up too much as well. I just think because I've had so many times I've been like, they're getting it. And I think as much as fans, we can attest to that. Like, and as you said, like there's some stuff that we haven't seen enough of to really draw the conclusions. But I think this is the best shot I've seen them give it.
It's amazing the push that they're making behind this game. I mean, even like the way Tabata, it's interesting him talking about marketing and how you have to, in one of the interviews, he was talking about having to market this game with confidence. Like every beat they put out, all that matters is just act confident, be confident about what you're pushing out there. And it's like the push and the financial risk that they're putting behind this game is crazy, and it's awesome to see a series that we all love getting this much momentum going to release.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I am in a cautiously optimistic phase. I would really want to love the hell out of this game.
I guess one thing I want to point out too is that like in as a counterpoint to what you said about Tim's thing is that like in my headline for that review was like, you know, changing all the little problems while the big one gets worse.
And what's the big one? You know,
the big one was the storytelling in that.
Yep.
But I think there's a difference in that, like that was, I mean, well, different writers and stuff too, but also connected to a previous.
Is it? Did Nojima write 13 and 13-2? I'm just saying there might be more of a connection in the writing there, because Nojima, I mean, in theory, they're still going off his script or his rough outline for 15. Okay, go on.
Anyway, it's not even about the specific. It's not about the specific writer. It's about the scenario. About the fact that like 13-2 is going off from a previous story that was already a little bit like.
And so this is under the assumption that Versus 13 had nothing to do with 13, in a way.
No,
I'm saying you're saying 13 to 13-2, but this is 13 to Versus 13 to 15.
Okay.
So in theory, it's still a tree.
No. Well, I guess maybe you have a point there. I guess when I'm the point I want to make is, I guess, like at that point you can point to a lot of little things and say like for 13 you can say, oh, there's this thing people didn't like, there's this, and in aggregate that sounds like a lot, and then the one thing that you can't really speak to is the story, and that ended up being a big problem for 13-2. I'm not saying that cannot happen with 15, but I'm saying I feel like that they are able to show more now that demonstrates that they are going more in the right direction than they were able to with 13.2. So it's like you talk about. I mean, we're not going to know if the proof is in the pudding until until the game comes out.
Yeah.
But I am seeing more on the character front, on the story front,
Yeah.
on the world front, just like all of the thematic stuff. I'm seeing more that makes me feel like they get it than the heavy skepticism I had that they would be able to sort of pull the story of 13 out of the gutter.
I mean, I'm more excited than I've ever been. And even after I played, I liked what I saw in the demo of episode to Sky, but I still wasn't like completely like, oh, I don't know. I was like more like this could go either way. And after having our visit, I feel like, oh, they are definitely going in a lot of directions that I think they should be going in and I think are really interesting. Now to just see how it all comes together and if it can pull off. And that's something that like you just never know. Any game that we see is like that though. We have that where it's like we see this one like an area like this looks great and then that could be maybe one of the better parts mixed in. But like I said, everything that I've seen looks great to me and I'm like I said more excited than I've ever been. I've actually, as Joe said, I'm more excited for the story and characters because I didn't really know too much. And then we went in and kind of picked their brains and everything sounds a lot more interesting to me than
What
it
if
ever did.
Kingsglaive is just royally disappointing? Is that going to color your expectations at all? Like, ooh.
I've never based like a movie on if I'm like gonna enjoy a product.
But in theory, if it's like
I
the
mean,
same team.
and it's coming out beforehand. I mean, like
I don't know.
Kingsglaive has the opportunity to get me more or less excited.
Absolutely.
About what's coming
if
up.
anything, it would make me more. I just never have really cared about like the side
I
aspects
hear you,
of
but it's
it,
like,
yeah.
I mean, there it is a case where it's the same development floor. Like, it's like that little corner off to the side. There's a
Well, and
Kingsglaive
also,
work.
I mean, some of the characters that we have the biggest questions about in terms of their role in the main story are. We're going to
I
learn a
feel
lot
like
more
that
about
is
them in
just-
Kingsglaive. We're going to learn more about Luna. We're going to learn more about Regis. So,
Yeah, but I feel like that is just a small portion of like what this whole game is going to end up.
But I think it sets a
direction.
tone, I think, for what they consider good storytelling.
Well, I'm just
in
saying,
this
I'm not
universe.
putting like everything on Kingsglaive on whether or not I'm gonna. If I like Kingsglaive, I'm gonna not like it or like it. I think that's one's a video game, one's a movie. They're very different beasts. I think one gives you more context and more information about the world you're about to step into, but I don't think that dictates whether or not I'm gonna like 15.
I'm not saying whether you're going to like it or not. I'm saying that like if the story for Kingsglaive is super awesome and gets me really into like King Regis and Luna as characters, I'm going to be more excited than I am already.
That's what
for
I'm saying.
15.
I would be more
But
excited. I wouldn't be.
If it ends up like, well, okay, so I'm kind of weird. I actually enjoyed Advent Children, but like
On what level?
we don't need to talk about
We'll
that.
talk
But
about it later.
but all I'm saying is that like if all of a sudden like if those characters in Kingsglaive, if it feels like they're dropping the ball in terms of establishing that world, in terms of making those people interesting, I'm going to be more skeptical about how ultimately the story is going to turn out.
When it's the part that is the biggest unknown for 15, I think this is a good barometer
Yeah.
for how they're treating that.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see. I'm just saying, I'm not putting all that on just one movie.
All right. And Joe and I are saying we clearly are 1,000%.
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
we do.
It's a fascinating year for Final Fantasy. I really want to see what's going
I
on
think
when
that's
this
what
thing
I think
comes out.
I'm interested to see how this game's going to do with people like, us who have been fans of the series for a long time. I'm also curious for people who are just getting into it and also maybe coming from a more of like, even a like just have played a bunch of Western RPGs and like, oh, like people have wrote in here, oh, I want to see what this is about. I'm liking what
Yeah.
I'm seeing.
It's Square's craziest fantasy. How many people wrote in and said, I've never played a Final Fantasy, but I think I want to try
Yeah,
this one.
and I just think it's going to be really interesting to see how, if they, obviously it's hard to please everybody, as we all know, and we all look for different things in our RPGs, but I'm just curious just to see how it kind of, the overall sentiment ends up being. Yeah.
And that new audience is going to be super. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. The people who were born, like, when the people who are 20 years old right now were like 1 year old when Final Fantasy VII came out. Like, I have all these, I have memories of, like, as an actual person
Oh, are you?
playing this. No, I mean, like,
Yeah.
like old enough that I connect
Yeah.
it to like who I am. It's like I
Yeah.
was, 16 or 17 or something when I was playing that, and like and to think that there are people for whom that game was just like, oh yeah, that came out before I was born, but I'm interested in this.
Yeah, a guy named Anthony wrote in on a similar theme and just asked because he says, let's see, where is he? But he talks about like how young he was when they announced Versus 13 versus when 15's coming out, and how he has so much nostalgia into the old marketing for Versus 13. And he asked, do we have nostalgia? Since it's been 10 years, are you guys nostalgic about those early Versus 13 trailers?
A little bit. I remember very distinctly about how like the sitting and watching in that like auditorium when that trailer was shown, and having a conversation at the end of that E3 about like, we did like a list of like the games we're most excited about, and Versus 13 beat 13.
Oh, because of the strength of the world, do you think?
Just based on they each just had super brief trailers, but there was something like so evocative about that initial trailer.
Sitting in the back of the car, and
no, I don't even think the car was there. It
wasn't?
No,
I don't think it was then.
The first trailer was just like Noctis, who back then had like way blue hair.
Doing the floaty sword thing, right?
Yeah, he was just sort of like sitting in a chair, and then sort of got up and like walked down some stairs, and a bunch of guys shot at him, and his swords came up, and like that was kind of it. But that was so much cooler than the 13 thing that they showed. That like, that ended up beating out 13 in that like E3 2005 or 6 list.
It's a big running start for this game, and to finally come out. What is the release date again? September
September
30th. All right, great. We'll find out then, everybody. Hey, I hope Final Fantasy fans learned something from this podcast, and it wasn't just us too much going like, who can say? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
it's
there's
always
something.
hard when we go, because we have these questions too, and we ask them, and they're like, I can't, like, we're not ready to talk about that. And then sometimes you're like, no, but I need to know. People want to know.
You turn into Kermit to scream at them.
But you know what I'm saying. It's I wish I could tell you the answer, and I would love to, but I guess that's would make they know how much that they want to deliver, and that won't completely spoil the experience for us. So I'm looking forward to September 30th.
It was a hell of a trip, and I think we shared as much as we conceivably can possibly share about that.
Yeah.
I still have more I would say, but we'll probably trickle it out in some Final Fantasy crap going into the future. Final Fantasy stuff working into the future. If you like this podcast, be sure to share it with a friend. If there's Final Fantasy fanatics out there, 15 fans that you know, and you think they might get something out of it, we'd appreciate it if you sent it their way. We also want to tease next week. It's almost like we wrapped up this Final Fantasy discussion. I think we should move on to a new cover story game.
What?
Yeah, so next week on the Informer Show, we will talk all about the next trip that we went on with a couple of mysterious guests and reveal exactly what's going on with our next cover story. So
Exciting.
yeah, exciting times. So that's it for this episode of the Game Informer Show.
And thanks everyone for checking out our stuff, like the podcasts and the Final Fantasy features all this month.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of really nice comments. So thank you so much. And thanks for watching or listening to this episode of the Game Informer Show. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll have a new exciting episode waiting for you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.